Think about the sheer volume of emotional noise that surrounds us every single day, the constant barrage of notifications, the pressure to react instantly, the flood of opinions, the urgency to respond before we've even had a moment to truly understand. Modern leaders, just like ancient rulers, are navigating a world saturated with emotional static. It can feel nearly impossible to hear your own thoughts, let alone the quiet voice of truth. Thousands of years ago, leaders faced similar challenges. When faced with impossible decisions, they turned to oracles, not for easy answers, but for clarity. They sought a stillness that allowed deeper truths to emerge from beneath the surface of fear, desire, and uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, captured this perfectly when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In the midst of chaos, he reminded himself, and now us, that inner stillness isn't just a luxury. It's the very foundation of clear judgment. This video is about uncovering how ancient oracles trained leaders to hear truth in emotional noise, and how those same principles are echoed powerfully in Stoic philosophy. We'll explore timeless ideas like detachment, presence, and resilience tools that are just as relevant today as they were in the temples of Delphi. The oracles didn't offer quick fixes or comforting lies. They offered something far more valuable, a method, a way to step back from reactive emotion, to pause, to listen deeply, and to respond from a place of clarity rather than confusion. And the Stoics, in their pursuit of wisdom, developed practices that align almost perfectly with this ancient art of discernment. They understood that the real battle isn't out in the world, it's within our own minds, in how we interpret events, manage our desires, and navigate uncertainty. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the noise, if you've ever made a decision you later regretted because emotion took over, or struggled to find clarity when everything seemed urgent, you're in the right place. Together, we'll walk through how to cultivate the stillness of an oracle, how to apply Stoic principles to modern challenges, and how to train yourself to hear truth even when emotions are running high. This isn't about suppressing feeling, it's about developing the capacity to choose how you respond. It's about finding a calm center amid the storm, just as leaders have done for centuries. By the end of this video, you'll have practical insights to carry into your daily life, whether you're leading a team, navigating personal relationships, or simply seeking more peace in a noisy world. Let's begin. Ancient oracles didn't rush their responses, they embraced silence first. They understood that truth rarely reveals itself in the initial surge of emotion or the frantic rush to respond. Instead, they cultivated a profound inner stillness, creating a space where clarity could emerge from the chaos of human concerns. This practice of deliberate pausing is deeply woven into the fabric of Stoic philosophy. It's the vital first step in preventing our impressions from hijacking our reason. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus offered a powerful reminder of this when he said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." That moment, that intentional hold, is the Stoic pause. It's the conscious decision to insert a sliver of space between an event and your reaction, creating a buffer zone where you can choose your response rather than being swept away by a reflexive feeling. This isn't about becoming passive or unfeeling. It's about empowerment. It's about moving from being a passenger on a turbulent emotional roller coaster to becoming the calm pilot who can navigate through the storm. Seneca, another giant of Stoic thought, brilliantly captured the power of this delay. He wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." He advised to let the sun set on your wrath, suggesting that even a short pause can dramatically alter our perspective and prevent us from saying or doing something we will later deeply regret. That anger, that initial flare of emotion, is often just noise. It's the static that distorts the true signal. By pausing, we allow that static to settle, making way for a much clearer transmission. Think about a modern-day scenario, a heated argument with a partner or a colleague. The words fly, tempers flare, and in that heated moment, the urge to deliver a cutting remark or a defensive accusation can feel overwhelming. It feels true, it feels justified in that instant. But if you can exercise the Stoic pause, if you can take a single deep breath, excuse yourself for a glass of water, or simply consciously choose to not speak for the next 10 seconds, you create an opening. In that opening, you might realize that your reaction is coming from a place of old hurt or fear, not the present situation. You might see that the other person is also operating from their own emotional noise. That pause allows you to respond to the root of the issue, not just react to the surface-level symptom. It transforms a potential relationship-damaging confrontation into an opportunity for understanding and resolution. Can you recall a time in your own life when just a moment of pause completely changed your perspective? Perhaps it was when you almost sent an email fueled by frustration, but decided to sleep on it and woke up with a completely different, more constructive approach. Or a time you stopped yourself from interrupting someone, listened fully, and discovered you had completely misunderstood their point. That is the oracle's stillness in action. It's in those seemingly small moments that we reclaim our agency. We start to train ourselves to hear the quieter, wiser voice beneath the shouting of our initial impressions, building a practice of discernment that serves us in every aspect of our lives. How often do we mistake our emotional reactions for facts? We tend to believe that our initial feelings are an accurate reflection of reality, when in truth, they are often just a distorted interpretation of it. This crucial distinction between an external event and our internal judgment of that event is the very heart of Stoic practice, and it mirrors the ancient oracle's role in separating divine truth from the emotional pleas and fears of those who sought their counsel. The oracles didn't just deliver messages, they delivered them with a clarity that was untouched by the anxiety or hope of the petitioner. They provided the raw, unvarnished truth, and it was the leader's job to receive it without filtering it through their own emotional biases. The Stoics called this process the doctrine of assent, the moment we choose whether to accept an initial impression at face value or to challenge it with reason. Marcus Aurelius spent a great deal of his private writings, his meditations, training himself in this exact skill. He constantly reminded himself to strip away the value judgments we automatically add to our perceptions. He advised himself to see things as they are in their own nature, not as we have labeled them through our personal lens of desire and aversion. He wrote, "Take away your opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint. Take away the complaint, I have been harmed, and the harm is taken away." This is a profound insight. The event itself is neutral. It just is. The harm, the offense, the frustration, these are not inherent in the event. They are products of our opinion, our assent to a negative judgment about the event. This idea is perfectly crystallized in one of the most famous quotes from Epictetus. It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. Think about the power in that statement. An event in itself is neither good nor bad. It simply occurs. It is our assessment, our internal narrative about that event that generates the emotional turbulence. A leader, for instance, might receive critical feedback on a project. The event itself is just words on a page or spoken in a meeting. It is neutral data. But if that leader's judgment is clouded by insecurity or pride, they might assent to the impression that this criticism is a personal attack, a threat to their status, or proof of their inadequacy. That judgment, that added layer of story, is what creates the feelings of anger, defensiveness, or shame. The emotional noise of their reaction completely drowns out the useful truth that might be contained within the feedback. They've mistaken their impression for reality. In doing so, they might miss a crucial opportunity for growth or fail to correct a genuine flaw in their plan. The oracle's truth, the valuable data within the criticism, gets lost because the leader was too busy reacting to the noise of their own judgment. This happens to all of us constantly. We receive an ambiguous text message and immediately weave an entire story of neglect or intention around it. We see a colleague talking to the boss and jump to a conclusion about our job security. We encounter a traffic jam and interpret it as a personal injustice designed to ruin our day. In each case, we are not responding to the thing itself, but to the judgment we have hastily attached to it. So, let's bring this into your own life. Can you identify one recent situation where your initial emotional reaction was likely a judgment, not a fact? Perhaps a time you felt snubbed or anxious about an upcoming challenge or irritated by someone's behavior. Look at that moment again. What was the bare, objective event stripped of all your storytelling? And what was the judgment you added that created the emotional charge? Just practicing this act of separation, of seeing the impression and then the reality behind it, is how we start to quiet the noise and hear the truth, just as the ancient seekers did when they listened to the oracle's clear, unattached voice. Oracles advised leaders on what to pursue and what to avoid. Stoics called this the discipline of desire. This wasn't about suppressing natural wants or pretending we don't have preferences. It was a sophisticated form of mental training, a way to sort through the endless stream of wants and fears that clutter our minds and cloud our judgment. The goal was to align our deepest pursuits with what is truly good virtue, reason, and character, while releasing our frantic grip on everything else, especially those external outcomes we can't ultimately control. By doing this, we dramatically reduce the emotional static in our lives. Every unfulfilled desire and every realized aversion creates noise, frustration, anxiety, disappointment, fear. But when we carefully examine what we're chasing and what we're running from, we often find that much of it is unimportant, fleeting, or entirely outside our command. This process of examination creates a profound clarity, mirroring the oracle's ability to cut through a leader's personal wishes to reveal the essential truth of a situation. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood better than most what was truly within his power, laid out this principle with stunning simplicity. He said, "Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This is the foundational filter." The discipline of desire asks us to pour our energy and our hope into that first category, our own actions, our judgments, our character. It asks us to be indifferent, in a sense, to the second category. Not that we don't prefer good health or success, but we don't stake our happiness on it. We pursue external goals with excellence while understanding that the outcome itself is not the source of our worth or peace. This is how we quiet the noise. The fear of failure loses its power when you realize that succeeding with integrity is the true victory, regardless of the external result. The craving for approval dissolves when you see that living by your principles is the only reputation that truly matters. Consider a leader facing a monumental decision. one that is ethically sound but will undoubtedly be unpopular with a loud segment of their audience or stakeholders. The desire for public approval is a powerful force. It's a deep-seated human need to be liked, accepted, and praised. This desire creates immense emotional noise, anxiety about the backlash, mental rehearsals of the criticism they'll receive, and tempting thoughts of compromising just enough to avoid the conflict. A leader untrained in the discipline of desire might succumb, making a popular but weak decision. But a leader who has practiced this Stoic art can pause and apply the filter. They can ask, is public approval within my control? The answer is no. They can control how they communicate, the reasons they give, and the integrity of their process, but they cannot control how people react. Therefore, to place their desire for it at the center of their decision is to hand over their tranquility and their judgment to the whims of others. The only thing truly within their power is to make the most virtuous and reasoned choice they can. By releasing the desire for the specific outcome of universal approval, they achieve mental clarity, the noise fades, and they can hear the clear signal of what is right. They are free to act with courage, not because they are fearless, but because they have correctly identified what is worth fearing. The loss of their own character, not the loss of someone else's opinion. This practice is incredibly relevant on a personal scale, far beyond the boardroom or the political arena. Think about your own life and the countless desires that tug at your attention throughout the day. The desire for a perfectly clean house before you can relax, the desire for a promotion that would validate your hard work, the desire for your family to behave exactly as you've planned, or the aversion to having a difficult but necessary conversation. Each of these desires and aversions, if left unexamined, generates its own little storm of emotional noise, worry, frustration, impatience. But what if you took a moment to apply the discipline? What is one desire you are holding onto that, if you released your attachment to its specific outcome, would immediately bring you more mental clarity? Perhaps it's the desire for a project to be perfect, which is causing you procrastination and stress. By shifting your desire to simply doing your best work with the time and resources available, something within your control, you liberate yourself to actually begin. Or maybe it's an aversion to conflict, leading you to avoid setting an important boundary. By recognizing that the other person's reaction is not yours to control, your desire can shift to acting with respectful honesty, an action entirely within your power. Releasing these attachments isn't about giving up. It's about focusing your energy where it actually makes a difference, quieting the distracting noise of uncontrollable outcomes so you can hear the truth of what you need to do right now. Oracles delivered hard truths, Stoics learned to love them. This is the essence of amor fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of one's fate. It's the radical practice of not just grudgingly accepting what happens, but embracing it, welcoming every event, especially the difficult and unexpected ones, as if you had chosen it yourself. For the ancient leaders who sought guidance from oracles, the prophecies they received weren't always pleasant. They might be told they would lose a great battle or that their reign would end in turmoil. The oracle's role wasn't to soothe their fears, but to present reality as it was, and the leader's task was to accept that reality without complaint and find a way to move forward within its boundaries. The Stoics took this a step further. They believed that to fight against what is already true is to create a special kind of inner suffering, a resistance that generates its own emotional noise and paralyzes our ability to act effectively. By embracing amor fati, we stop resisting the current of life and instead learn to swim with it, discovering a profound sense of calm and agency, even in the midst of circumstances we would never have chosen. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, though not a Stoic himself, perfectly captured the spirit of this ancient idea when he wrote, My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. This is the ultimate Stoic move, to transform a perceived obstacle into the very path itself. It's the understanding that fate is not something that happens to you, but something you weave yourself into. Marcus Aurelius constantly reinforced this perspective in his private meditations, training himself to see the interconnectedness of all events. He advised himself to accept everything which happens, even if it seems disagreeable, because it leads to this, the health of the universe. He saw his own challenges, his own frustrations and losses, as necessary threads in a vast, beautiful tapestry whose full pattern he could not perceive. His job was not to curse the color of the thread he was given, but to use it with skill and grace. History offers powerful examples of leaders who embodied this principle, transforming catastrophe into a foundation for renewal. Consider the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself. His reign was plagued by constant warfare, a devastating plague that wiped out a significant portion of the empire's population, and betrayals from those he trusted. He could have easily succumbed to despair, anger, or self-pity. Instead, he practiced amor fati. He accepted these horrors not as personal injustices but as the material of his life's work. It was in the muddy camps on the front lines of the Germanic wars that he wrote his meditations, turning immense external pressure into a timeless masterpiece of philosophical reflection. He didn't love the war or the plague, but he loved his opportunity to respond to them with virtue. He embraced his fate as an emperor facing adversity, and in doing so, he created meaning from the chaos. This isn't about passive resignation, it's about active engagement with reality as it is, not as we wish it were. Think of a modern example, an entrepreneur whose flagship product fails spectacularly at launch. The initial reaction might be one of devastation, shame, and a strong desire to undo the past. This resistance creates immense emotional noise, a cacophony of regret and blame that clouds judgment. But if that leader can practice amor fati, the entire narrative shifts. They stop fighting the reality of the failure and instead embrace it. They might say, "This failure is now part of my story. What does it teach me? What doors does it close? And more importantly, what new doors does it open that I never would have seen otherwise?" This acceptance allows them to calmly analyze what went wrong, free from the distorting lens of panic. The failure is no longer a monster to be feared, but a tough but valuable teacher. It becomes the necessary precondition for their future success, the foundation of a wiser, more resilient company. So bring this into your own life for a moment. What is one challenge you are currently resisting? Perhaps it's a health issue, a financial setback, a strained relationship, or a professional disappointment. Notice how your resistance to it, your wish that it weren't so, adds a layer of anxiety and frustration on top of the actual circumstance itself. Now, imagine what would happen if you chose to embrace it with amor fati. Not to approve of the thing itself, but to accept its existence as your current reality, and to decide to find the value within it. How might this shift in perspective change your emotional state? How might it open up new possibilities for action that were invisible to you while you were busy fighting what is already true? Embracing our fate is how we move from being victims of circumstance to active architects of our response, finding a deeper strength and a quieter mind exactly where we least expected to. Imagine seeing your life from a mountaintop. What would stand out? From that dizzying height, the frantic urgency of your daily concerns would start to look different, wouldn't it? The traffic jam that ruined your morning, the tense email exchange that occupied your thoughts for hours, the meeting that felt like the most important thing in the world. From this vantage point, they would shrink to mere specks, tiny movements in a vast, unfolding landscape. This shift in perspective isn't just a flight of fancy. It's a powerful Stoic exercise known as the view from above, and it served the same purpose for ancient philosophers as the elevated, detached viewpoint of an oracle did for seeking leaders. It's a deliberate mental technique designed to pull us out of the narrow, emotionally charged tunnel vision of our immediate circumstances and return us to a place of calm, objective clarity. The goal is to reduce the intense emotional charge we attach to events by revealing their true scale and context. When we're immersed in a crisis, it feels all-consuming. Our heart rate climbs, our focus narrows to the perceived threat, and we can easily lose sight of everything else. This is the emotional noise at its loudest. The view from above turns down the volume by forcing us to zoom out, not just spatially but temporally. We are invited to see our current worry against the backdrop of our entire life, our community, human history, and even the cosmos itself. Suddenly, that thing that felt so monumental is placed in its proper proportion. It doesn't make the challenge disappear, but it strips away the layers of catastrophic storytelling we've wrapped around it, allowing us to see the issue itself, clean and clear, without the distorting static of panic. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this practice, and he frequently used it in his writings to ground himself amidst the immense pressures of leading an empire. He would remind himself to constantly take a cosmic view, writing, "You can rid yourself of many useless things among those that disturb you, for they lie entirely in your imagination, and you will then gain for yourself ample space by comprehending the whole universe in your mind, and by contemplating the eternity of time, and observing the rapid change of every part of everything, how short the time from birth to dissolution, and the illimitable time before birth, as well as the equally boundless time after dissolution." In that single passage, he zooms out from his immediate troubles to the boundless scale of time and space, realizing that his moment of difficulty is a brief flicker in an infinite expanse. This isn't meant to make our lives feel insignificant, but rather to liberate us from the self-importance that magnifies our problems. It reveals what is truly meaningful, our character, our virtues, our connections, and reveals what is largely trivial, the minor slights, the temporary setbacks, the opinions of others. Consider a leader navigating a full-blown public relations crisis, perhaps a product failure that has sparked outrage on social media and drawn negative press from every major outlet. In the war room, the atmosphere is thick with tension. The initial, visceral reaction might be one of sheer panic. The company's reputation is collapsing in real time. Careers are on the line, and the urge to make a knee-jerk, defensive statement is overwhelming. This is the view from the ground, engulfed in the emotional firestorm. Now, imagine that leader consciously employing the view from above. They close their eyes for a moment and mentally rise above the building. They see the city, then the country, then the planet spinning in space. They consider the history of commerce, remembering that even the most revered companies have faced and overcome profound failures. They think ahead to next year or 5 years from now and realize this event, while serious, will be a single chapter in a much longer story. From this elevated perspective, the panic begins to settle. The problem hasn't vanished, but it's been framed correctly. The leader can now see that the meaningful response isn't one of frantic defensiveness, but of calm, principled action, taking full responsibility, outlining a clear plan to make it right for customers, and communicating with honesty and transparency. The noise of fear is replaced by the clear signal of duty. This practice is incredibly accessible for any of us at any moment. You don't need to be an emperor or a CEO to use it. Think about a current worry that feels heavy on your shoulders. a financial pressure, a conflict with a friend, anxiety about an upcoming presentation. Now try the view from above right now. Mentally pull the camera back. See yourself in the room, then in your home, then in your town. Consider the thousands of people around you, each with their own complex set of joys and struggles just as real as your own. Think about this problem 1 week from now. Will it still feel this intense? How about 1 year from now or 10? This isn't about dismissing your feelings, but about granting them their appropriate weight. From this vantage point, what shifts? Often, the sharp edges of anxiety become smoother. The overwhelming problem becomes a manageable situation. You might realize that what truly matters isn't the outcome of the presentation, but the courage you show in giving it. You might see that the conflict, while painful, is a chance to practice patience and understanding. The view from above doesn't solve the problem for you, but it gives you the quiet mind and the clear eyes needed to solve it yourself, cutting through the emotional fog to see the path forward. Stoics didn't fear bad news, they rehearsed it. This deliberate practice of envisioning potential adversity is known as premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. Far from being a pessimistic or fearful exercise, it was a powerful psychological tool for building resilience and emotional antifragility. Think of it as the mental equivalent of a fire drill. We don't conduct fire drills because we expect the building to burn down. We do it so that if smoke ever fills the hallway, our response is calm, practiced, and effective, not panicked and chaotic. The ancient oracles understood this principle intuitively. When a leader approached them for guidance, the oracle often presented a range of possible futures, including difficult and challenging outcomes. This wasn't meant to terrify the seeker, but to inoculate them against the shock of misfortune. By mentally preparing for these possibilities beforehand, the leader could receive even the harshest prophecy without being emotionally derailed, allowing them to strategize and respond from a place of reasoned clarity rather than blind fear. Seneca, a master of navigating the turbulent political waters of ancient Rome, was a strong advocate for this practice. He framed it not as dwelling on misery, but as a form of strategic preparation that robbed future hardships of their power to surprise and destabilize us. He wrote, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." In another powerful passage, he advised, "Rehearse them in your mind: exile, torture, war, shipwreck. All the terms of our human lot should be before our eyes." This sounds intense, but his point was profound. By regularly contemplating the very worst that could happen, we accomplish two crucial things. First, we realize that we can, in fact, endure it. Our imagination often makes potential suffering seem far more unbearable than the reality would be. By walking through the scenario in our minds, we prove to ourselves our own capacity for resilience. Second, and more importantly, we strip the surprise out of misfortune. It is the element of shock, the cry of, "This wasn't supposed to happen," that amplifies our emotional pain and triggers panic. When we have already accepted that something could happen, its actual occurrence is met with a calm, this. I have considered this possibility. I know what to do. Consider a modern leader steering a tech startup through a period of rapid growth and intense competition. The market is volatile, funding is uncertain, and a single negative news cycle could spook investors. The emotional noise here is constant, a low hum of anxiety about things that could go wrong. A leader untrained in premeditatio might be tempted to ignore these fears, adopting a blind optimism that shoves any negative thought into a mental closet. But this doesn't make the fears disappear, it just lets them fester in the dark, growing more potent. When a crisis finally does hit, a key employee resigns, a competitor launches a superior product, a major client pulls out, the leader is completely blindsided. The surprise triggers a full-blown panic response, clouding their judgment and leading to reactive, fear-based decisions. Now, imagine that same leader practicing Stoic premeditation. Each week, they might set aside 15 minutes to calmly and rationally walk through their worst-case scenarios. They would mentally picture that key employee leaving. What would they do first? Who would they talk to? How would they reallocate responsibilities? They would imagine the competitor's product launch. How would they analyze it? What strengths does their own team still possess? How could they pivot their strategy? By mentally rehearsing these events, they are not inviting them to happen. They are vaccinating themselves against the paralysis of shock. When one of these events eventually occurs, the leader's reaction is fundamentally different. There's no gasp of surprise, no descent into panic. Instead, there's a calm, almost eerie sense of recognition. Okay, they might think, this is the scenario we contemplated. Let's execute the first steps we envisioned. The emotional noise of the crisis is dramatically reduced, allowing their rational mind to take the lead and navigate the storm effectively. This practice is incredibly accessible and doesn't require imagining ancient horrors like exile or shipwreck. It's about applying the same principle to the challenges of modern daily life. I want you to try a very small exercise right now. Think of one upcoming event that is causing you a low level of anxiety. Perhaps it's a difficult conversation you need to have, a presentation at work, or a financial decision. Now, instead of pushing the worry away, lean into it for just a moment. Close your eyes and mentally play out the absolute worst-case scenario in a realistic, step-by-step way. What is the very worst that could reasonably happen? See it unfold in your mind. Now, crucially, watch yourself in this mental movie. How would you respond? What would you do next? Who would you call? What is the first practical step you would take to begin addressing the situation? By moving from the vague fear of it to a specific, managed plan for it, observe what happens to your anxiety. Does its sharp edge dull slightly? Does it feel more like a manageable challenge and less like an impending catastrophe? This is the power of premeditatio malorum. It transforms unknown fears into known quantities, allowing you to face the noise of the world not with trepidation, but with prepared confidence. Every leader needs an inner citadel, just as ancient rulers sought the oracle's sanctuary. This wasn't a physical place, but a mental and spiritual stronghold, a fortress of character, built on reason and virtue that remained unshaken by the external storms of fortune, opinion, or chaos. The oracles provided a sacred space where truth could be heard above the din of political intrigue and personal ambition. In the same way, the Stoics taught that each of us must construct an inner sanctuary, a place of retreat not to hide from the world, but to find the clarity and strength to engage with it more effectively. This inner citadel is where we go to remember who we are and what we stand for, especially when everything around us seems to be falling apart. It's the ultimate source of resilience, the wellspring of calm in the center of the storm. Marcus Aurelius, who spent much of his reign on military campaigns far from home, constantly fortified his own inner citadel through his writings. He left us a powerful image of what this looks like in practice, writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But he went even further, offering a stunningly vivid description of this internal fortress. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. And perhaps most famously, he advised, retire into yourself. The rational principle which rules has this nature, that it is content with itself when it does what is just. This is the core of the idea. The citadel isn't built from arrogance or isolation. It's built from the quiet confidence that comes from living with integrity and aligning your actions with your deepest principles. It's a place where the shouts of the outside world become a distant murmur, and the quiet voice of your own reason can finally be heard. Building this resilience isn't about becoming emotionally numb or detached. It's about creating a structure so strong that emotions can be felt and processed without them threatening to collapse your entire being. Think of it like the foundation of a skyscraper designed to withstand hurricane-force winds. The building will sway. It's meant to, but its core integrity keeps it from shattering. The Stoic inner citadel allows you to feel the full force of fear, anger, or grief without being controlled by it. You acknowledge the emotion, you understand its message, but you make your decisions from the deeper, calmer ground of your rational mind. This is how you maintain composure when chaos erupts. Consider a paramedic arriving at the scene of a severe car accident. The visual and auditory stimuli are overwhelming. The twisted metal, the flashing lights, the cries of the injured. The emotional noise is deafening, screaming for a reaction of panic or paralysis. But a well-trained paramedic doesn't operate from that place. They have a deep, internal citadel built through years of training and practice. In a split second, they retreat inward to that place of practiced procedure and clear purpose. Their breathing steadies, their focus narrows to the immediate task, and they begin to triage making life and death decisions based on reason and training, not on the swirling vortex of emotion around them. They feel the urgency, the gravity, the human tragedy, but those feelings inform their compassion without hijacking their competence. Their inner citadel is their ability to access that trained calm amidst the chaos, allowing them to be a source of stability and effective action when it is needed most. This principle applies just as powerfully to the less dramatic crises of everyday life. Imagine a project manager whose most critical team member suddenly quits a week before a major deadline. The initial surge of stress and anxiety is intense. The impulse might be to blame, to despair, or to frantically try to fix everything at once. But a manager who has cultivated their inner citadel will pause and retreat inward. They might take a brief walk, close their office door for 5 minutes of quiet thought, or simply take a few conscious breaths. In that space, they reconnect with their core principles: resourcefulness, problem-solving, and supporting their remaining team. From that centered place, they can assess the situation calmly, delegate tasks effectively, and communicate a plan with confidence, thereby preventing the panic from spreading and becoming a team-wide meltdown. Their inner strength becomes a contagion of calm. So what are the bricks and mortar of this personal fortress? It's built through the consistent daily practices we've been exploring: the pause, the discipline of desire, the view from above. But it's also built from the values you choose to live by. Your citadel is strengthened every time you choose honesty over convenience, courage over comfort, and principle over popularity. It's reinforced by the books you read, the people you surround yourself with, and the quiet moments of reflection you protect in a noisy world. Take a moment to look within your own life. What is one thing, one practice, one value, one relationship, or one belief that consistently makes you feel stronger, calmer, and more centered when external pressures mount? Perhaps it's a morning walk that clears your head, a commitment to telling the truth that frees you from anxiety, or the memory of a mentor who believed in you. That is a brick in your citadel. Identifying these sources of strength is the first step in consciously fortifying your inner sanctuary, ensuring that when the next storm arrives, you have a place of unshakable peace to which you can retreat, regroup, and respond not as a reactive victim of circumstance, but as a leader of your own life. Strip away the drama by describing things plainly, as oracles did. They delivered their prophecies without the emotional spin of the seeker. No sugarcoating, no exaggeration, no judgment. They presented the facts as they perceived them, clean and unadorned. The Stoics adopted this same discipline as a core mental exercise, a way to cut through the layers of emotional storytelling we instinctively wrap around every event in our lives. They called it practicing objective description, and its power lies in its simplicity. The goal is to describe any situation to yourself in the most basic, factual terms possible, as if you were a neutral journalist reporting the scene or a scientist observing data. This act of stripping away the loaded language we normally use instantly reduces the emotional charge of an event and reveals its true nature, which is almost always far less catastrophic than our initial interpretation. Epictetus, who focused intensely on the gap between perception and reality, gave us the perfect mantra for this practice. He instructed his students, "Don't say more to yourself than the first impressions report." If you've heard that someone is speaking ill of you, don't defend yourself against the charges, but instead say, "Yes, and he doesn't know the rest of my faults, or he would have mentioned those as well." This is objective description in action. The first impression is simply, you heard someone is criticizing you. That is the bare fact. Everything else, the feeling of betrayal, the anger, the speculation about their motives, the mental rehearsal of your defense, is an addition you've chosen to layer on top of that fact. By refusing to add that extra narrative, you prevent a simple piece of information from exploding into a full-blown emotional crisis. You see the thing for what it is, not for what your fears and insecurities might turn it into. Consider a leader faced with what initially feels like a massive professional failure. A project they championed and invested 6 months into has just been cancelled by senior leadership. The initial, emotionally loaded description might sound like this internally. "This is a complete disaster. My judgment is clearly flawed. Everyone must think I'm incompetent. I've wasted all that time and effort for nothing. This is going to ruin my credibility and probably derail my career." Notice the dramatic language: disaster, flawed, incompetent, ruin, derail. This description is saturated with judgment and catastrophic prediction. It creates a tidal wave of emotional noise, shame, anxiety, defeat, that makes clear thinking impossible. Now apply the Stoic exercise of objective description. The leader would strip the event down to its plain, observable facts. "The project I was leading has been cancelled. The stated reason was a shift in company priorities. I spent 6 months working on it. I now have available time and a new set of priorities to address." Do you feel the difference? The emotional storm begins to settle immediately. The event is still significant, but it is no longer a personal indictment or a career-ending catastrophe. It is a change in circumstances. From this calm, clear-headed space, the leader can now engage in productive problem solving. They can ask rational questions. What did I learn from those 6 months that I can apply to the next project? How can I best reallocate my team's skills? How do I align my work with the company's new direction? The failure is reframed from a personal tragedy into a neutral learning opportunity, all through the simple power of changing how we describe it to ourselves. This practice is a tool you can use in any moment of emotional turbulence. Think about a recent event that triggered a strong reaction in you, a disagreement, a piece of criticism, an unexpected change in plans. Now try to describe that event to yourself using only objective, neutral language. Write it down if it helps. Instead of, "My friend completely dismissed my feelings and was so hurtful," you might say, "During our conversation, my friend said, 'I think you're overreacting.' I felt a sensation of heat in my face and a tightening in my chest." Instead of, "This traffic jam is ruining my entire day," try, "My car is moving slower than expected toward my destination, which will likely cause me to arrive later than I had planned." This isn't about denying your feelings, it's about creating a space between the event and your feelings so you can understand them better. Often, you'll find that the emotion is attached not to the fact itself, but to the dramatic story you've wrapped around it. By describing things as an oracle would plainly and without drama, you reclaim the power to choose your response, responding to the world as it actually is, rather than to the frightening story you've been telling yourself about it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself to find clarity, much like consulting an oracle. His private writings, which we now know as meditations, were never intended for publication. They were his personal ritual, a nightly conversation with his own soul to sift through the noise of the day, to separate the fleeting emotions from the enduring truths, and to realign his actions with his deepest principles. He wasn't just jotting down events, he was engaging in a profound act of philosophical hygiene, cleansing his mind of the emotional grime that accumulates through daily life. This practice of reflective journaling is one of the most powerful and accessible Stoic tools we have, a direct line to the kind of clarity that ancient leaders sought from oracles. While they traveled to distant temples, we need only reach for a pen and a notebook to begin the same journey inward, to hear our own quiet wisdom above the din of reaction and impulse. The Stoics understood that our minds are like a glass of muddy water. When we're agitated, stirred up by the events and emotions of the day, everything appears cloudy and distorted. We can't see clearly, we react to shadows and misinterpret shapes. Journaling is the act of setting that glass down and allowing the sediment to settle. As the particles of frustration, fear, anger, and pride slowly drift to the bottom, the water above becomes clear, allowing us to see things as they truly are. This is why the evening was such a prized time for this exercise for philosophers like Seneca. He explicitly advocated for this nightly audit, writing, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." He believed that this daily self-examination was the key to moral progress, a way to confront our mistakes without self-recrimination and to acknowledge our successes without pride, always with the goal of doing better tomorrow. The magic of journaling lies in its ability to externalize our internal chaos, thoughts and emotions that swirl endlessly in our heads, feeding on each other and growing more distorted, lose much of their power when we force them onto the page. We have to structure them into sentences, which requires a minimal level of logic and coherence. This very act forces a degree of objectivity. You might start writing about a conflict feeling entirely in the right, but as you describe the event sequentially, you might stumble upon a detail you'd overlooked, a tone you used, an assumption you made, that suddenly casts the entire interaction in a new light. This is the journal acting as the oracle, reflecting back not what you wish had happened, but what actually did, revealing the truths you were too emotionally invested to see in the moment. Consider a project manager who ends their day feeling simmering resentment toward a team member who challenged their authority in a meeting. The emotional noise is loud. He was disrespectful. He undermined me in front of everyone. He's trying to make me look bad. If these thoughts are left to churn internally, they will lead to a tense, unproductive relationship and likely a confrontational meeting the next morning. But if that manager takes 10 minutes for a Stoic journaling practice, the process might unfold differently. They might begin by objectively describing the event. During the budget review, David suggested an alternative supplier, stating that my chosen vendor had delivery issues last quarter. Already, the language is less charged. Then they might probe their own reaction. I felt my face get hot and I immediately became defensive. Why? His data was correct. My impulse was to shut him down to assert control. I was afraid the directors would think I hadn't done my research. In just a few lines, the narrative has completely shifted from "David disrespected me" to "I felt threatened by valid feedback and reacted from a place of insecurity." The journal hasn't solved the problem, but it has identified the real problem, which wasn't David's action but the manager's own fearful interpretation of it. Armed with this clarity, the manager can now plan a rational response, perhaps thanking David for his research and incorporating the feedback rather than acting on a reactive impulse. This practice of nightly excavation reveals patterns we are otherwise blind to. You might discover, after a week of entries, that your frustration consistently peaks on days filled with back-to-back meetings, revealing a deep need for periods of quiet focus. You might notice that criticism from a particular individual always triggers a disproportionate response, pointing to an old wound that needs healing. Your journal becomes a map of your emotional landscape, showing you where the hidden traps and triggers lie. This is how you move from being governed by unseen forces to becoming the cartographer of your own soul. The simple act of writing down the storms of the day allows you to step outside of them, to become the calm observer who can discern the useful signal from the destructive noise. I invite you to try this for yourself. Tonight, before you let the day slip away, take just 5 to 10 minutes with a notebook. Don't worry about elegant prose or perfect grammar. This is for your eyes only. Start by simply asking yourself a few of the questions the Stoics might have used. What happened today that disturbed my peace? Where did I act in alignment with my values, and where did I fall short? What did I assume to be true that might not be? What unnecessary suffering did I create for myself through my own judgments? As you write, pay attention to the subtle shift that occurs, the gradual quieting of the mental static, the emergence of a clearer picture, the gentle separation of what truly matters from what was merely passing drama. You may find that you are your own most insightful oracle, and that the answers you seek have been waiting patiently for the quiet space to be heard. What if you cared as little about praise as an oracle did about pleasing kings? These ancient seers were not swayed by the status of their petitioners. A prophecy delivered to a powerful emperor carried the same weight and truth as one given to a common soldier. Their value was not tied to the approval of their audience, and their message remained pure, undistorted by the desire for favor or the fear of reprisal. This state of serene independence is precisely what the Stoics aimed for with their doctrine of indifference to external things, particularly the opinions of others. They understood that our desperate craving for approval and our deep-seated aversion to criticism are among the greatest sources of emotional noise in our lives. This constant worrying about what others think functions like a persistent static, drowning out the clear, steady signal of our own inner compass and our reasoned judgment. By consciously working to reduce the volume of this external feedback, we create the mental quiet necessary to hear our own truth. This isn't about becoming arrogant, cold, or dismissive of others. It's about making a crucial shift in what we value most. The Stoics proposed a simple but radical recalibration. Focus exclusively on your own character and actions, the things within your control, and become indifferent to the resulting praise or blame, the things outside your control. Your reputation is not your character. Your reputation is what others think of your character, and that is entirely in their minds, subject to their own biases, moods, and limited information. To tie your self-worth and emotional stability to something so fickle and uncontrollable is to hand over the keys to your tranquility to every person you meet. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about facing unjust criticism, offered brilliantly practical advice on this front. He said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.' This isn't false modesty, it's a profound mental trick." It immediately defangs the criticism by accepting it and even expanding upon it with humor, completely robbing it of its power to hurt you. It acknowledges that you are a work in progress and that one person's opinion is a tiny, incomplete data point. History provides powerful examples of leaders who embodied this principle, often at great personal cost. Consider the figure of Marcus Aurelius himself, leading the Roman Empire through constant war and plague. His decisions, based on Stoic virtue and a profound sense of duty, were often deeply unpopular with the Senate, the army, and the populace. He could have chosen the path of populism, making decisions designed to win cheers and temporary favor. Instead, he consistently chose the harder, right path over the easier, popular one. He funded relief for plague victims from the imperial treasury, even when it was financially draining, and he pursued peace negotiations that were criticized as weak by the more hawkish elements in Rome because he believed they were in the long-term interest of the empire. His journal, Meditations, is filled with reminders to himself to ignore the chanting of the mob and the flattery of courtiers, and to focus solely on acting with justice, wisdom, and courage. His legacy endured not because he was always liked, but because he was consistently principled. In a modern context, think of a CEO who must decide to halt production of a profitable but ethically questionable product line. The financial reports are strong, shareholders are happy, and public perception is positive. But the leader, upon deeper reflection, realizes the product causes environmental harm or preys on consumer addiction. The emotional noise is immense: the fear of angry investors, the dread of a dropping stock price, the anxiety over negative press, the internal craving to be seen as a successful captain of industry. A leader enslaved to external validation would find a way to justify continuing the product, but a leader who has cultivated stoic indifference can cut through that noise. They can separate the question of reputation, "What will they think of me?" from the question of character, "What is the right thing to do?" By focusing only on the latter, they find the clarity to make the difficult, unpopular call. They understand that their worth is not measured by a quarterly earnings report, but by their ability to sleep at night knowing they acted with integrity. The praise or blame that follows is merely weather; it will pass. This practice invites a deeply personal inventory. Where in your own life have you given others a remote control to your emotions? Is it the number of likes on a social media post that dictates your mood for the hour? Is it the desire for your boss to constantly recognize your hard work, leaving you feeling deflated when the praise doesn't come? Or perhaps it's the opposite, the searing sting of a casual critical remark from a relative or colleague that you replay in your mind for days, allowing it to overshadow a dozen compliments. I want you to identify one specific area right now where you find yourself hooked on external validation. It might be a role, parent, employee, artist, friend, where you intensely crave approval. Now imagine what it would feel like to slowly release that hook, not to stop caring about doing a good job or being a good person, but to stop needing the external applause to confirm that you are one. How would that change your decisions? How would it free up mental energy currently spent on managing perceptions? The goal is not to become impervious to the world, but to become so grounded in your own self-assessment that the opinions of others become interesting data rather than emotional commands, allowing you to hear your own inner oracle with perfect clarity. Oracles listen deeply to the gods. Stoics listen deeply to reality. This practice of profound, attentive silence wasn't merely about hearing words. It was about creating a spacious stillness within oneself, a receptive emptiness where the full truth of a situation could land and be understood without the distortion of our own preconceptions and prejudices. The ancient seekers who traveled to Delphi or other oracle sites weren't just paying for an answer. They were participating in a ritual of deep listening, where the first and most crucial step was to quiet their own minds enough to receive a message that might contradict their deepest desires or fears. The Stoics recognized this same skill as a fundamental pillar of wisdom in everyday life. They called it the art of withholding assent, but we can think of it simply as listening without judgment. It's the conscious decision to suspend our internal commentary, to pause our urge to categorize, criticize, or plan our rebuttal, and instead to offer our full, unbiased attention to what is actually being communicated. This creates a gap between the stimulus and our response, a sacred space where clarity can emerge. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, emphasized the profound power inherent in this kind of receptive attention. While many of his direct writings are lost, his teachings were passed down, and one of the most enduring insights attributed to him is the reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. This is far more than a clever quip about politeness. It's a deep epistemological principle. We cannot learn while we are talking. We cannot understand a situation fully while we are busy defending our position or interpreting everything through the filter of our own agenda. True listening, in the Stoic sense, is an act of humility and a disciplined exercise of reason. It requires us to temporarily set aside the ego's desperate need to be right, to be seen, or to be in control, and to instead become a vessel for information in its purest form. It is in this quiet receptivity that we often hear not just the words being said, but the meaning behind them, the unspoken fears, the hidden assumptions, and the core truths that louder, more reactive conversations always miss. Imagine a team leader mediating a heated dispute between 2 departments. The sales team is furious that product deliveries are consistently late, blaming the engineering team for incompetence and poor planning. The engineering team is defensive, arguing that sales makes impossible promises to clients without ever consulting on feasibility. The emotional noise in the room is deafening. Accusations are flying, voices are raised, and everyone is listening only to form their next counter-argument. A leader untrained in Stoic listening might jump in prematurely, taking sides based on their own biases or trying to force a quick compromise that leaves everyone resentful. But a leader who practices this art does something radically different. They consciously decide to listen not as a judge, but as an anthropologist seeking to understand 2 different cultures. They allow each side to speak fully without interruption, and they pay attention not just to the complaints but to the underlying values being expressed. The sales team's deep desire to maintain trust with clients, and the engineering team's passionate commitment to quality and realistic timelines. By withholding judgment and reflecting back what they are hearing, so your primary concern is that our reputation is being damaged by missed deadlines, and it sounds like you feel set up to fail when expectations aren't aligned. The leader does something magical. They make both sides feel truly heard, often for the first time. This act of non-reactive listening dissipates the anger, because the energy of conflict is often just a desperate cry to be understood. Once that need is met, the emotional static fades away, and the real problem emerges with crystal clarity: a broken communication process between departments. Now the conversation can shift from mutual blame to collaborative problem solving, all because the leader provided the oracle's gift of silent, attentive space. This transformative practice is available to every single one of us in conversations great and small. It's not about becoming a passive sponge. It's about becoming an active, engaged, and neutral receiver. The next time you find yourself in any conversation, whether it's a casual chat with a partner about their day or a high-stakes negotiation, I invite you to try a simple experiment. Make it your sole goal to truly understand the other person's perspective. Consciously bite back your urge to interrupt, to correct a minor detail, or to immediately share your own similar experience. Instead, listen with the focused intent of someone trying to learn a foreign language. Notice their body language, the tone beneath their words, the values and fears that are driving their narrative. You might be astonished at what you hear when you finally stop the noise of your own internal commentary. You might discover that the argument you thought you were having isn't the argument at all, and that the path to resolution was always there, waiting quietly in the space between your thoughts, just waiting for you to become silent enough to hear it. Stoics sought discomfort to strengthen their resolve. Oracles delivered truths that did the same. This is the principle of voluntary hardship, a proactive and counterintuitive practice where we intentionally choose to embrace small, manageable challenges in order to inoculate ourselves against the paralyzing fear of future adversity. The oracles didn't shield leaders from painful realities. They presented them head-on, understanding that confronting difficulty is the only way to build the fortitude necessary to lead effectively. In the same spirit, the Stoics believed that by willingly stepping into discomfort during times of peace and plenty, we train our minds and bodies to remain calm, capable, and clear-headed when real hardship inevitably arrives. It's a form of emotional and psychological vaccination. We expose ourselves to a weakened strain of adversity to build up our immunity to the full-blown disease of panic and despair when life gets truly difficult. The Roman Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus, who taught Epictetus, was a powerful advocate for this kind of training. He argued that comfort and luxury were actually the enemy of virtue and strength, lulling us into a false sense of security and making us soft. He stated plainly, how can a person become courageous if they only seek a life of comfort? How can they learn self-control if they are always pursuing pleasure? His point was that virtue isn't built in the easy times, it's forged in the challenging ones. But since we can't always control when those challenges arrive, the wisest course is to create our own. He famously said, we should accustom ourselves to a simple and modest diet, to hard work, and to plain clothing. This wasn't about advocating for a life of miserable poverty, but about practicing a kind of minimalist resilience. By periodically saying no to an extra helping of food, by choosing to walk instead of drive for a short trip, by turning off the heating for a night and using an extra blanket, we are not punishing ourselves. We are reminding our subconscious mind that we are capable, that we can endure, and that our happiness is not dependent on perfect external conditions. This practice systematically reduces the power of external circumstances to trigger emotional overreactions, because we have proven to ourselves again and again that we can handle much more than we think. Consider a modern leader who has achieved significant success, surrounded by the trappings of that success: a luxurious car, a large home, fine dining, and first-class travel. There's nothing inherently wrong with these things, but a steady diet of effortless comfort can create a fragile psyche. This leader might become so accustomed to a frictionless existence that the smallest inconvenience, a flight delay, a critical comment, a minor market fluctuation, can provoke a disproportionately angry or anxious response. The emotional noise of that overreaction then clouds their judgment. Now, imagine that same leader consciously practicing voluntary discomfort. They might decide to practice frugality for 1 week each month, preparing their own simple meals instead of eating out, driving an older car, or even taking a cold shower each morning. These acts are not about saving money, they are about saving their resilience. By willingly embracing a minor hardship, they accomplish two things. First, they actively weaken the neural pathways that equate comfort with safety and discomfort with danger. A cold shower is just cold water, it's not a crisis. A simple meal is still nourishing. This recalibration makes them less reactive to life's inevitable bumps. Second, and more importantly, it builds a deep, quiet confidence. When a genuine crisis does hit the market, this leader doesn't spiral into panic. They have a reservoir of proven endurance to draw upon. They can think clearly because they know, on a visceral level, that they can handle discomfort. They have already faced the cold water and the simple meal and emerged unscathed, and that inner fortitude allows them to face the falling stock price with the same steady resolve. This practice is incredibly accessible and doesn't require grand gestures of self-denial. It's about finding small, deliberate ways to step outside your comfort zone to strengthen your emotional core. This week, I want to invite you to choose one small voluntary discomfort and commit to it. It could be as simple as leaving your phone in another room for an evening to sit with your own thoughts, taking a walk in slightly chilly weather without complaining, skipping a snack you crave, or doing a household chore you usually put off without a sense of resentment. As you do it, pay close attention to the internal reaction. Notice the initial urge to resist, the little voice that says this is unnecessary or unpleasant. Then observe what happens after you move through that resistance. Do you feel a small sense of pride or self-mastery? Does the world feel a little less threatening because you've proven you can handle a minor inconvenience? That small spark of confidence is the beginning of a profound resilience, the same unshakable strength that allowed ancient leaders to hear the oracle's hardest truths and not only endure them, but act upon them with clarity and courage. We often miss the truth because we're stuck in yesterday or tomorrow. Our minds are time travelers, constantly leaping backward to replay past regrets or catapulting forward to imagine future catastrophes, and in the process, we completely bypass the only moment that ever truly exists, the present. This mental time travel generates immense emotional noise, the grief and resentment of what has been, the anxiety and dread of what might be. The ancient oracles understood the power of the immediate. When a leader approached with a question, the oracle's entire focus was on that singular query, in that specific moment, unclouded by the leader's past failures or future hopes. The Stoics championed this same fierce focus on the present, not as a form of escapism, but as the most practical and effective way to engage with reality, to reduce mental clutter, and to access a clarity of thought that is impossible when we are mentally anywhere else but here. Seneca, with his piercing insight into the human tendency to squander our most precious resource, time, lamented this exact problem. He observed, "We are always complaining that our days are few and acting as though there would be no end of them." But he went further, pinpointing the source of our anxiety. The mind is anxious about the future until it is schooled to focus on the present. His remedy was to stop allowing our thoughts to be hijacked by what is not happening. He wrote, "Wild animals run from the dangers they actually see, and once they have escaped them, worry no more. We, however, are tormented alike by what is past and what is to come." This is the core of the Stoic argument. Our animal lives entirely in the present, reacting to immediate threats and then returning to calm. Humans, with our incredible capacity for memory and foresight, often turn those gifts into instruments of self-torture, creating suffering out of events that are not currently happening. The Stoic practice of presence is the deliberate effort to return to that animal-like immediacy, not by becoming less intelligent, but by becoming more disciplined with our attention. Consider a leader facing a high-stakes negotiation. The emotional noise in their mind could be deafening. They might be mentally replaying a past negotiation that failed, feeling the sting of that old embarrassment, and allowing it to fuel a defensive, aggressive stance in the current meeting. Simultaneously, they might be projecting into the future, imagining all the ways this deal could fall apart, worrying about shareholder reactions or fearing the personal repercussions of failure. This mental chaos, this being everywhere but in the room, guarantees they will miss crucial cues. They'll fail to listen actively, overlook subtle shifts in the other party's body language, and react from a place of past trauma or future fear rather than present moment strategy. Now imagine that same leader applying a Stoic focus on the now. They consciously anchor themselves at the negotiation table. They feel the weight of their body in the chair, notice the temperature of the room, and bring their full attention to the words being spoken right now. They are not thinking about the next thing they will say. They are fully listening to what is being said. This presence creates a profound calm. From that calm, clarity emerges. They can read the situation accurately, respond to the actual offers on the table rather than the phantom ones in their head, and make nuanced decisions based on the real-time flow of information. They become more effective because they are fully there, just as the oracle was fully present with the seeker's question, undistracted by yesterday's prophecies or tomorrow's petitioners. This isn't about ignoring the past or failing to plan for the future. The Stoics were meticulous planners and reflective thinkers. The difference is that planning for the future is a present moment activity you do now, and learning from the past is a present moment activity you do now. The problem arises when we are psychologically lost in those other times, feeling the emotions of events that are not occurring. The practice of presence is the practice of pulling your consciousness back to your current task, your current conversation, your current breath. It's the simplest and most accessible form of mental hygiene. To start building this muscle, I invite you to a very small commitment. For the next 5 minutes each day, practice doing one thing with your complete and total attention. It could be drinking your morning coffee, feeling the warmth of the mug, smelling the aroma, tasting the flavor, without looking at your phone or planning your day. It could be taking a walk and noticing the sensation of your feet on the ground, the sounds around you, the air on your skin. When your mind inevitably wanders to a past regret or a future worry, which it will gently, without judgment, guide it back to the sensations of the present. This isn't mindfulness for its own sake. It's practical training for leadership and for life. It's the daily repetition of choosing to be here now, so that when you face your next great challenge, you have the capacity to show up fully, leaving the noise of other times behind and hearing the truth of what is right in front of you. Oracles revealed how everything is connected. Stoics called this sympatheia. This profound concept, central to their worldview, is the understanding that we are not isolated individuals navigating a random universe, but integral threads woven into a vast, living tapestry of existence. Where the oracle might have seen this interconnectedness through a divine or prophetic lens, the Stoics arrived at it through reason and observation of the natural world. They looked at the cosmos and saw a single, rational, interconnected system, a cosmos where every action, every event, and every person is part of a seamless whole. This perspective is a powerful antidote to the noisy turbulence of personal emotion, because it immediately pulls us out of the cramped, self-centered story of me versus them and into the expansive, humbling reality of us within everything. When you truly internalize that you are part of this whole, your small grievances, your personal irritations, and your selfish impulses begin to lose their grip on you. They are revealed for what they are, tiny ripples in an infinite ocean, significant to you in the moment but minuscule in the grand scheme. This doesn't diminish your importance, it redefines it. Your role is not to be the center of the universe, but to play your part harmoniously within it, and that shift in perspective is incredibly liberating. Marcus Aurelius constantly returned to this idea to ground himself amidst the immense solitude of power. He used it as a tool to dissolve anger, frustration, and pride, writing in his meditations, "What brings you joy? To feel that you are part of the common cause, that you are offering actions that benefit the whole, actions that are in accord with that common cause." He saw his own life and struggles not as a separate drama, but as a single note in a grand symphony. In another passage, he advises himself to remember that we are all born for one another, and that to feel anger or annoyance at someone is to work against our fundamental nature, which is social and cooperative. This is sympatheia in practice. It's the rational understanding that my well-being is inextricably linked to yours, and that harming you or acting against the common good is ultimately a form of self-harm. It fosters a deep and genuine calm because it replaces the anxious, grasping energy of the ego with the steady, purposeful energy of contribution. You stop asking, "What's in it for me?" and start asking, "How does this action fit into the whole?" This is the ultimate view from above, not just spatially, but spiritually. Consider a corporate executive facing a difficult decision about layoffs during an economic downturn. The emotional noise is intense, and personal fear for the company's survival, anxiety about shareholder reaction, guilt and sorrow for the employees who might lose their livelihoods, and perhaps even a hidden layer of fear for their own job security. An executive thinking only from a place of personal emotion or narrow corporate survival might make a rash, across-the-board cut that saves money in the short term but devastates morale, destroys institutional knowledge, and cripples the company's capacity to recover. Now imagine that same executive pausing to apply the Stoic lens of sympatheia. They would expand their view far beyond the immediate balance sheet. They would consider the interconnected web of lives and communities that the company touches, the employees and their families, the suppliers who depend on their business, the customers who rely on their products, and the local economy that benefits from their presence. This broader view doesn't make the decision easy, but it changes its nature entirely. It moves the calculation from "how do we minimize our pain?" to "how do we navigate this challenge in a way that causes the least harm to the entire system of which we are a part?" This might lead to more creative, humane solutions, perhaps across-the-board temporary salary reductions instead of layoffs, offering extended severance and outplacement services, or transparently involving employees in brainstorming cost-saving measures. The decision is no longer just a financial one. It becomes an ethical one rooted in an understanding of interdependence. The executive's personal anxiety is quieted because it is subsumed into a larger, more purposeful consideration for the common good. They find calm not by avoiding the problem, but by facing it with a wider, more connected heart. This practice invites a quiet moment of reflection on the nature of your own influence. Every action you take, every word you speak, sends a ripple out into the world, touching lives and situations you may never even see. Your frustration vented at a barrister can sour their entire morning, which they might then carry home to their family. Your small act of patience in a traffic jam might prevent a chain reaction of road rage. Your decision to create something beautiful, to offer a word of encouragement, or to simply do your job with integrity contributes a note of harmony to the whole. And conversely, a choice made in selfishness or anger introduces a note of discord. The ancient oracles saw these threads of fate. The Stoics asked us to take responsibility for the threads we hold in our own hands. So I encourage you to take a brief inventory of your recent actions. Can you trace the ripple effect of a single choice you made today, however small? Did an action taken from a place of personal frustration create unintended negative ripples in your network? And conversely, did a moment of kindness or consideration likely create a positive wave that extended far beyond your immediate view? Recognizing this constant, invisible interconnectedness is the first step toward living with greater intention, ensuring that the ripples you send out into the vast ocean of cause and effect are ones that contribute to the calm, not the chaos. When emotion shouts, reason should whisper, but persistently. This internal dialogue is the very essence of Stoic practice, a disciplined method for interrogating our own emotional responses before we allow them to dictate our actions. The ancient oracles didn't simply blurt out cryptic phrases. They used a rigorous process of interpretation to extract meaning from signs and symbols, separating divine insight from superstitious noise. In the same way, the Stoics developed a powerful technique for acting as their own inner oracle, using the quiet, persistent voice of logic to question the loud, demanding shouts of raw emotion. This isn't about suppressing what we feel, but about creating a crucial moment of space, a courtroom of the mind where our initial impressions are put on the witness stand and examined for their truth and their value before we grant them the power to control our behavior. The foundational text for this practice comes from Epictetus, who laid out the entire process with elegant simplicity. He instructed, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test. This moment of pause is everything. It's the difference between being a passenger on a runaway emotional train and being the calm conductor who can apply the brakes and assess the situation. The initial impression, the feeling of anger, the surge of jealousy, the pang of fear, is not the truth. It is merely a signal, a piece of data that may or may not be accurate, and it is our job to investigate it before we give it our assent and allow it to become a full-blown, action-driving emotion. We are not our first thoughts, we are the reasoning mind that chooses what to do with them. This interrogation follows a clear line of logical questioning. First, we must ask about the facts. Is this emotional reaction based on an objective reality or on a story I am telling myself? Often, we react not to an event but to our judgment about the event. Someone cuts us off in traffic. The fact is that a car changed lanes abruptly. The story we tell is that the driver is intentionally disrespectful, reckless, and a menace to society. The anger we feel is a response to that story, not the fact. The second line of questioning concerns virtue. Even if my initial impression is factually correct, does acting on this emotion align with my core values? Will expressing this rage make me more courageous, more just, more temperate, and more wise? Or will it simply make me a source of more conflict and pain? This two-step filter of fact and virtue allows us to drain the emotional charge from a situation and respond from a place of chosen principle rather than reflexive passion. Imagine a manager who has just received an email from a superior, bluntly criticizing a recent project proposal and copying several other senior leaders. The initial, visceral emotional shout is one of white-hot anger mixed with profound embarrassment. The impulsive urge is to fire off a defensive reply, to point out the flaws in the superior's reasoning, to protect their wounded ego and reputation in front of the others. This is the shout, but if this manager has trained themselves in the Stoic art of interrogation, they will pause. They will let reason begin its persistent whisper. They will take the impression to court. First, the facts. Is the criticism valid? Upon a calm rereading, they might find that 2 of the 3 points raised are actually quite accurate. The budget section was indeed hastily prepared, and the timeline was optimistic. 1 point is based on a misunderstanding. The story of a personal attack begins to crumble under factual scrutiny. Second, virtue. What would a wise and courageous response look like? A defensive, angry email might feel satisfying in the moment, but it would damage the relationship, make them look immature, and close off future collaboration. A response that acknowledges the valid feedback, calmly clarifies the misunderstanding, and outlines a revised plan demonstrates humility, professionalism, and a commitment to excellence, all Stoic virtues. By logically dissecting the anger, the manager avoids a career-limiting rash decision and instead crafts a response that strengthens their position and their character. This practice transforms our relationship with our own inner world. We stop being victims of our emotional weather and become skilled meteorologists who can understand the patterns and choose how to prepare for the storm. It empowers us to say, I am feeling anger, but I am not anger itself. I am the consciousness that is aware of this feeling, and I have the power to investigate it and decide if it serves me. This is the ultimate act of self-governance, so I want to invite you to try this today. Bring to mind one recent, strong emotional reaction you had. It could be irritation at a family member, anxiety about a work task, or envy toward a friend's success. Now put it on the witness stand. Gently but firmly ask it the Stoic questions. What are the bare facts of the situation, separate from my story? Does this feeling, if acted upon, help me become the person I want to be? You might be surprised at how quickly the shouting subsides when you finally decide to listen to the whisper. In a noisy world, silence is where truth speaks loudest. We spend our days surrounded by a relentless barrage of sound and stimulation. The ping of notifications, the hum of traffic, the endless chatter of media and conversation. This constant external input creates a kind of mental static that makes it nearly impossible to hear our own thoughts, let alone the quiet, steady voice of our inner guide. The ancient oracles understood this necessity for quietude. They operated in secluded temples, away from the political hustle of cities, because they knew that profound truths could only be heard in an atmosphere of undisturbed stillness. The Stoics, in their pursuit of a rational and virtuous life, placed an equally high value on solitude. For them, it wasn't about loneliness or isolation, but about strategic withdrawal, a conscious retreat from the crowd in order to reconnect with oneself and cultivate the clarity that is so easily drowned out by the opinions and demands of others. Seneca, who navigated the treacherous and gossip-filled court of Emperor Nero, was a passionate advocate for this practice. He saw solitude not as a luxury, but as a vital necessity for anyone seeking to maintain their integrity and peace of mind. In one of his letters, he offers this powerful insight. You must withdraw into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach. Notice that he doesn't say to withdraw from people permanently, but to withdraw into yourself. This is the key distinction. Solitude is the space where we process our interactions, where we digest our experiences, and where we separate the wisdom we've gathered from the noise we've collected. It's where we can hold our own thoughts up to the light and examine them without the pressure of an audience. Seneca believed that without these regular returns to the self, we risk being shaped entirely by external forces, becoming echoes of other people's voices rather than authors of our own convictions. Consider a modern executive who feels overwhelmed by the pace of her role, constantly pulled between meetings, decisions, and the endless stream of emails. Her thinking has become reactive, a series of quick responses to the latest crisis, and she feels a growing disconnect from the larger vision she once had for her leadership. Recognizing this, she deliberately schedules a full day of solitude at a quiet retreat center, leaving her phone and laptop behind. For the first few hours, the silence is almost deafening. Her mind races with leftover fragments of conversations and to-do lists. But as she sits with the discomfort, gradually, the mental storm begins to settle. She takes long walks, jotting down thoughts in a notebook without agenda. In that expansive quiet, a memory surfaces of a mentor who once told her that true leadership is about nurturing potential, not just managing output. This insight, which had been buried under months of operational noise, suddenly rings with clarity. She sees that her recent focus on efficiency has come at the cost of mentoring her team. That day of silence doesn't provide her with a 10-point plan, but it gives her something far more valuable, a reconnection to her core principle. She returns to her work realigned, making a conscious effort to carve out time for her team's development, which in turn reduces the number of crises she has to manage and restores a sense of purpose to her days. This power of solitude isn't reserved for grand retreats. It can be found in the small, daily pauses we intentionally create. It's the 5 minutes of quiet with your morning coffee before you check your phone. It's the decision to drive in silence instead of listening to a podcast, allowing your mind to wander and process. It's the short walk you take alone during your lunch break, consciously leaving the buzz of the office behind. In these micro moments of withdrawal, we give our inner oracle the space to speak. We allow the fragments of our experience to coalesce into understanding, and we return to our lives not with more information, but with more insight. The goal is to build a life where the default isn't noise, but a baseline of quiet from which we can consciously choose to engage with the world, rather than being perpetually engulfed by it. I want to invite you to consider your own relationship with silence. When was the last time you allowed yourself to simply be with your own thoughts, without any external input or distraction? This week, could you schedule just 10 minutes of intentional solitude each day? It doesn't require a special place or equipment, just a willingness to turn down the volume of the world and listen for the truth that has been waiting patiently for you to become quiet enough to hear it. When in doubt, ask, what would Seneca do? This simple but profound question is the heart of adopting a mentor's perspective, a mental technique that allows us to instantly access centuries of wisdom in the midst of our most emotionally chaotic moments. The ancient leaders who traveled to consult an oracle were, in essence, seeking a mentor's view. They wanted an objective, elevated opinion untainted by their own fears and desires. We may not have a priestess at Delphi to guide us, but we do have the collected wisdom of the Stoic philosophers, and we can learn to channel their calm, reasoned voices in our own minds. This practice is about more than just historical curiosity. It's a practical psychological tool for creating immediate distance from our reactive emotions. By momentarily stepping outside of ourselves and asking what a specific, admired figure would advise, we force our brain to switch gears from the emotional limbic system to the more rational prefrontal cortex. This shift doesn't negate our feelings, but it allows us to process them with the clarity of a trusted external advisor, someone who has no personal stake in our drama but a deep commitment to truth and virtue. Epictetus, who himself was a student of the great Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus, directly advocated for this kind of emulation. He instructed his students to have the words and actions of a wise person constantly at hand to guide their own, saying, "If you have a worthy mentor, you must remember him by day and by night. You must become like him, and so order your life that it will never be chaotic or chaotic." The goal here isn't to lose your own identity or to ape someone else's personality. It's to internalize a set of principles so thoroughly that they become a reflexive part of your own decision-making process. When you vividly imagine how your chosen mentor would analyze your situation, You are essentially giving your own highest self a megaphone, amplifying the voice of reason that is so often whispered over by the shout of impulse. You are creating a council of wisdom inside your own mind, and in moments of confusion, you can convene that council for immediate consultation. Imagine a mid-level manager, let's call her Sarah, who is facing a classic workplace dilemma. She has just discovered that a colleague, someone she considers a friend, has taken credit for her idea in a meeting with senior leadership. The initial emotional response is a toxic cocktail of betrayal, anger, and humiliation. The impulsive limbic brain reaction is to storm into her colleague's office and unleash a torrent of accusations, to immediately see the entire leadership team on a defensive email, or to withdraw completely and seethe in silence while plotting revenge. This is the noise. Now, imagine Sarah pauses and invokes her Stoic mentor. She has chosen Marcus Aurelius. She closes her eyes for a moment and asks, what would Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who faced countless betrayals, do in this situation? Almost immediately, a calmer perspective emerges. She might recall his meditations on the irrationality of others and his reminders not to be surprised when people act according to their own flawed nature. She might remember his focus on his own duty and character above all else. From this vantage point, the path forward becomes less about retaliation and more about integrity. Instead of confronting her colleague in anger, she might schedule a private conversation to calmly state what she observed and how it made her feel, not to punish, but to clarify and set a boundary. She might then focus her energy on continuing to produce excellent work, understanding that her long-term reputation is built on consistent action, not on winning a single credit for a single idea. The mentor's perspective hasn't solved a problem for her, but it has given her a roadmap for navigating it with dignity and wisdom, transforming a potential relationship-ending explosion into an opportunity for assertive, virtuous action. The true power of this practice lies in its personalization. Your chosen mentor doesn't have to be a famous Stoic. It could be a historical leader, a fictional character, a beloved grandparent, or even a composite ideal of wisdom you create yourself. The key is to select a figure whose judgment you deeply respect and to spend some time learning their principles and, more importantly, the spirit behind their decisions. Read their words, study their biographies, and truly try to understand not just what they did, but why they did it. What was their core operating system? Then, when you find yourself at an emotional crossroads, whether it's a moment of temptation, a flash of rage, or a fog of indecision, you can consciously invoke them. Make it a deliberate ritual. Pose the question directly. What would my mentor's name do here? What principle would they apply? How would they respond without letting their emotions dictate their actions? This simple act of mental time travel can collapse centuries of wisdom into a single moment of clarity, providing you with the objective counsel of an oracle without ever leaving your chair. So I encourage you to take a moment now to choose your own Stoic guide. It might be Seneca for his practical advice on anger, Epictetus for his unwavering focus on what is within our control, or Marcus Aurelius for his profound reflections on duty and acceptance. Once you have your mentor, carry them with you, and the next time you feel the first hot spark of emotion clouding your judgment, invite them into the conversation. You might be surprised at how clearly you can hear their voice cutting through the noise to show you a wiser way. Oracles often highlighted hidden blessings. Stoics practiced gratitude to see them. In the midst of delivering difficult prophecies, these ancient seers would frequently point a leader's attention toward the resources, allies, or opportunities that were still available to them, even in their darkest hours. This wasn't about offering empty consolation. It was a practical technique for rebalancing a perspective that had become dangerously skewed by loss or fear. The emotional noise of anxiety, anger, and despair has a way of narrowing our vision, making us blind to everything but the source of our pain. Gratitude, in the Stoic sense, is the deliberate act of widening that lens again. It is a cognitive tool for correcting our focus, forcing us to scan our entire field of experience for points of light rather than fixating solely on the shadows. By systematically directing our attention to what is present, working, and good, we actively drain power from the negative emotions that thrive on a sense of lack and victimhood, replacing volatility with a deep, steady contentment. This practice is about more than just feeling momentarily better. It's a form of mental discipline that builds emotional resilience over time. The Stoics understood that our thoughts direct our attention, and our attention shapes our reality. If we allow our mind to dwell exclusively on threats and problems, our entire world begins to feel threatening and problematic. But if we train our mind to also notice and linger on sources of support, beauty, and benefit, we build a psychological foundation that can withstand life's inevitable shocks. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded armies and managed a plague-ridden empire, constantly used this tool in his private writings. He would remind himself to actively seek out the good, however small, writing. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He didn't wait for a feeling of gratitude to spontaneously arise. He generated it through conscious thought. He practiced finding the value in everything, even his adversaries, noting, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks." His gratitude wasn't naive, it was strategic, a way of fortifying his mind against the unexpected attacks of fortune by ensuring he never lost sight of the privilege of the fight itself. Consider a leader trying to steer their organization through a period of significant financial loss and painful layoffs. The emotional atmosphere is thick with grief, fear, and uncertainty. The leader's own mind might be consumed with the stress of the balance sheet, the guilt of letting people go, and the anxiety about the future. If they operate from this place of pure deficit, their communications will be laced with panic. Their decisions will be reactive, and they will inadvertently spread despair throughout the entire team. Now, imagine that same leader taking a stoic pause to practice gratitude. Before addressing the company, they take a moment to write down specific, genuine points of appreciation. The core team of veterans who have chosen to stay and fight, the loyalty of a key client who has stuck with them, the lessons learned from past recessions that they can apply now, even the simple fact that the company still exists and has a chance to rebuild. This isn't about ignoring the reality of the hardship, it's about properly contextualizing it. When the leader then speaks to the organization, their tone is fundamentally different. They can acknowledge the severity of the situation without being consumed by it. They can highlight the team's resilience, the strength of their remaining product line, and the opportunity to innovate under pressure. By leading with gratitude for what remains, they reframe the challenge from a pure catastrophe into a difficult but manageable test of endurance. This shift doesn't erase the pain, but it gives everyone a foundation of strength to stand on, transforming a potential downward spiral into a rallying point. The leader's gratitude becomes a contagion of calm and determination, directly countering the emotional noise of the crisis. This powerful practice is something you can integrate into your life with immediate effect, and it requires nothing more than a few moments of your attention. The day's difficulties, large and small, will always shout for your focus. Gratitude is the gentle but persistent whisper that reminds you of the other 90% of your experience that is neutral or positive. It's the muscle you build by consistently choosing to look for the stream of water in the desert, rather than staring only at the sand. So I would like you to try a very simple exercise right now in this moment. Think about your current day with all its minor irritations and major worries. Now cut through that noise and identify 3 specific things you can be genuinely grateful for. They don't have to be grand or philosophical. Perhaps it's the warmth of the coffee you drank this morning, the reliability of your car that started without issue, the text message from a friend that made you smile, or the simple fact that you have the capacity to learn and grow from challenges. By naming them, you make them real. You bring them from the background of your awareness into the foreground, and in doing so, you actively compose a more complete and accurate picture of your life, one where difficulty exists but does not reign supreme. Oracles clarified what was fated and what wasn't. Stoics distinguish between what we control and what we don't. This fundamental separation is perhaps the single most powerful tool in the entire Stoic toolkit for cutting through emotional noise and achieving genuine clarity. For the ancient leader standing before the Pythia at Delphi, the prophecy wasn't just a prediction, it was a boundary map. It outlined the terrain of destiny, the fixed elements they had to accept, and in doing so, it implicitly highlighted the open ground where their own will and effort could still make a difference. The oracle's message directed their attention away from useless fretting over the unchangeable and toward meaningful action within the realm of the possible. The Stoics took this ancient insight and systematized it into a profound psychological practice known as the dichotomy of control, a mental filter that, when applied consistently, has the power to dissolve vast swaths of anxiety and free up immense reserves of energy for what truly matters. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood powerlessness better than most, laid out this principle with breathtaking clarity right at the opening of his Enchiridion or handbook. He wrote, "Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing." This is the ultimate Stoic sorting exercise. The first category, the things within our power, is surprisingly small but incredibly potent. It contains only our own faculty of choice, our judgments, our values, our intentions, and our voluntary actions. Everything else, the actions of other people, the weather, the stock market, our health, our reputation, whether we get the promotion, even the eventual outcome of our best laid plans, belongs to the second, much larger category. These are the externals, and while we can influence them, we cannot ultimately control them. The emotional suffering we experience, the Stoics argue, almost always arises from a fundamental error. We invest our energy and attach our happiness to things in that second category, treating them as if they were ours to command. We try to control the uncontrollable, and in the resulting frustration, we create our own noise. The immense power of this practice lies in its ability to instantly reallocate our mental and emotional resources. Anxiety is simply energy wasted on an outcome we cannot guarantee. When we stop trying to manage the unmanageable, that anxious energy is liberated and can be redirected into the one area where we have absolute sovereignty, our own choices and responses. Imagine a senior executive preparing to launch a major new product. The emotional noise in the weeks leading up to the launch could be deafening. They might lie awake at night worrying about how competitors will react, whether the media will give them positive coverage, if the economic climate will shift, or if a key influencer will endorse it. Every one of these concerns falls squarely into the category of things outside their control. A leader who understands the dichotomy, however, would perform a conscious mental triage. They would acknowledge those external factors without fighting them or feeding them with frantic mental energy. Instead, they would pour every ounce of their effort into the things they can control, refining the product to the highest possible standard, ensuring their team is prepared and motivated, crafting a clear and honest marketing message, and developing robust contingency plans for likely scenarios. They focus on excellence in the process, not on fixating on the outcome. This shift doesn't make them passive. It makes them incredibly active and effective within their true sphere of influence. They lead with a calm confidence that is unshaken by external volatility because their sense of worth is tied to their effort and integrity, not to a specific result they cannot command. This practice is a lifelong discipline, not a one-time fix. Our minds have a stubborn tendency to drift back into the illusion of control, attaching our peace to external goals and then feeling devastated when life doesn't comply. The remedy is to make the dichotomy of control a daily, even hourly, mental habit, and you can start this practice right now with whatever is on your mind. I want you to bring to mind one current worry, one thing that's been consuming your mental energy. It could be related to your work, your relationships, your health, or your future. Now take out a piece of paper or open a notes app and draw a simple line down the middle. Label one column within my control and the other outside my control. Now ruthlessly sort the elements of your worry. Your colleague's opinion of you, outside your control, your preparation for the meeting, within your control, the final decision of the hiring manager. Outside your control, the quality of the application you submitted, within your control, the traffic on your commute, outside your control, your decision to leave 10 minutes earlier. Within your control, as you populate each column, pay attention to the physical sensation in your body. Do you feel a subtle release of tension as you move items to the outside my control column, acknowledging that you can release your grip on them? And do you feel a focused sense of agency as you list the items within your control, seeing a clear path for meaningful action? Your only job from this moment forward is to act with virtue and excellence on every single item in the first column, and to meet whatever appears in the second column with calm acceptance. This is how you silence the noise of what might happen and tune into the clear, empowering signal of what you can do right now. Everything changes. Oracles knew it, Stoics embraced it. This wasn't a pessimistic observation about the world, but a liberating truth that formed the bedrock of their emotional resilience. When a leader sought counsel from an oracle, the prophecy often served as a stark reminder of life's impermanence. Empires rise and fall, fortunes shift, and glory is fleeting. The oracle's role was to pull the leader's gaze away from the illusion of permanence and toward the ever-flowing river of change. The Stoics built an entire philosophy upon this same foundation, understanding that our greatest suffering doesn't come from change itself, but from our frantic, painful resistance to it. Our attachment to the way things are, or the way we believe they should always be, is the source of our emotional turbulence. When we clutch too tightly to people, positions, possessions, or even our own health, we are essentially trying to nail the river to the riverbed. The effort is futile and exhausting, and it guarantees we will be swept away by the current of time, fighting and drowning in the emotional noise of our own refusal to let go. Embracing impermanence, or amor fati in its temporal form, is the practice of learning to float in that river, to accept its flow, and to find a profound peace in the very transience that frightens so many. Marcus Aurelius, who witnessed the constant churn of life and death from his imperial throne, returned to this theme again and again as an anchor for his own soul. He wrote, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river. The upstream is a mirage, nothing can be held onto. He wasn't just being poetic, he was engaging in a deliberate cognitive exercise. By consciously reminding himself that every moment, every sensation, and every circumstance was already in the process of disappearing, he was systematically loosening his grip on them. This didn't make his experiences less meaningful, it made them more precious. It allowed him to appreciate the beauty of a moment without demanding that it last forever, and it allowed him to endure hardship with the calm knowledge that it, too, was already passing. This recognition of universal flux is the ultimate antidote to both the dizzying highs of attachment and the crushing lows of loss, smoothing them both into a steadier, more sustainable state of equanimity. Consider the profound difference this perspective can make in the face of a significant personal loss, such as the end of a long-held career or the passing of a loved one. The natural, untrained response is one of deep grief and a sense of utter devastation, as if the very foundation of the world has crumbled. The emotional noise is deafening, a storm of sorrow, anger, and fear. Now imagine navigating that same loss with a Stoic understanding of impermanence. This doesn't mean not feeling the grief. The Stoics were not robots. It means feeling it without the added layer of resistance and shock. There is a quiet, deep understanding that this loss was always part of the contract of life. The career, the relationship, the person, they were never given to you permanently. They were on loan from fate, and the loan has now been called. This perspective doesn't erase the pain of missing them, but it does remove the corrosive sense of injustice that often amplifies the pain into suffering. You can mourn the loss while simultaneously feeling a gratitude that it happened at all. You can think, I am so fortunate to have had this in my life for as long as I did, rather than, it's unfair that it has been taken away. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it is a trainable response. It allows you to carry your grief with a measure of grace and calm, honoring what was without being utterly destroyed by its passing. The emotional noise of despair is quieted by the clear, steady hum of acceptance. This practice is just as powerful for the smaller, daily attachments that create low-grade anxiety and frustration. We get attached to our routines, to our plans for the day, to our favorite coffee cup, even to our own expectations of how other people should behave. When traffic ruins our schedule, when a colleague is dismissive, or when a prized possession breaks, we experience a miniature version of that same resistance to change. We are fighting against the fundamental nature of the universe, and we will lose every single time. But if we have practiced embracing impermanence, our reaction is subtler, quieter. We feel the flicker of irritation, and then we hear the Stoic whisper, this too is change, this was never guaranteed to last, and we let it go, we adapt. We flow with the new circumstance rather than wasting energy demanding that the old one return. I want to invite you to try a brief but powerful exercise in loosening attachment. Bring to mind one thing in your life that you feel a strong sense of ownership over. It might be your professional title, a particular relationship dynamic, your physical fitness, or even a cherished daily ritual. Now I want you to consciously hold that thing in your mind and then say to yourself clearly and deliberately, this is not mine to keep forever, it is temporary. Pay close attention to the internal reaction. Does a part of you recoil from that thought? That's the attachment, the grip you've been holding. Now imagine what it would feel like to slowly, gently loosen that grip just a little. Not to love the thing any less, but to hold it more lightly, with open hands rather than a clenched fist. How does that change your relationship to it? Does it feel less like a possession and more like a precious passing gift? This simple act of mental release is how we begin to make peace with the river of time, learning to appreciate its beauty without being devastated by its current. Breath is the bridge between emotion and reason. It's a physiological anchor, a tool we carry with us every moment of our lives, yet one we rarely think to use with any intention. While the ancient Stoics didn't write explicit manuals on breathing techniques as some Eastern traditions did, their entire philosophy hinges on the moment of pause, the crucial gap between a triggering event and our response. And what is more fundamental to creating that pause than the simple, conscious act of drawing a single breath? The oracles understood this connection between the physical and the spiritual. They often employed ritualized breathing to enter a state of focused receptivity, clearing their own emotional static to become a clearer channel for insight. The Stoic focus on bodily awareness, on remembering that our rational mind is housed in a physical vessel that directly influences it, makes mindful breathing a perfectly aligned practice. It's a way to directly intervene in the body's stress response, calming the racing heart and settling the nervous system, so that reason has a stable platform from which to operate. When we experience a surge of emotion, anger, panic, anxiety, our body is hijacked by the sympathetic nervous system, launching into fight or flight mode. Our heart pounds, our muscles tense, and our breath becomes shallow and rapid. This is the body preparing for imminent physical danger, a system brilliantly designed for escaping predators but terribly mismatched for navigating a difficult email or a tense conversation. This physiological state is emotional noise. It literally makes it harder to think clearly. Conscious, controlled breathing is the most direct lever we have to pull to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's rest and digest counterpart. A long, slow exhale, in particular, signals to the primal part of your brain that the danger has passed, that it is safe to stand down. This isn't just psychological guesswork, it's basic biology. By regulating the breath, we regulate the body, and by regulating the body, we create the conditions for a regulated mind. We are not stopping the emotion, we are simply preventing it from flooding the entire system and short-circuiting our higher faculties. We are building the bridge that allows reason to cross over into the storm of feeling. Imagine a leader moments before walking into the boardroom to present a controversial new strategy they know will be met with skepticism, if not outright resistance. They can feel the familiar signs of anxiety, a tightness in their chest, a slight tremble in their hands, their mind starting to race through every possible objection and worst-case scenario. This is the critical juncture. They could walk in with that nervous energy which might make their voice quiver, their arguments sound defensive, and their presence seem uncertain. Or they could take just 60 seconds. Standing outside the door, they place a hand on their stomach. They inhale slowly through their nose for a count of 4, feeling their diaphragm expand and their hand move outward. They hold that breath for a brief moment, and then they exhale even more slowly through their mouth for a count of 6 or 7, feeling their body release its tension with the sigh of the breath. They repeat this 3 or 4 times. They are not trying to magically eliminate their nerves. They are simply performing a systems check, manually overriding the automatic panic response. As their heart rate steadies and their muscles relax, their mind begins to clear. The arguments they prepared reorganize themselves into a logical sequence. They remember their purpose and their preparation. They walk into the room not as a bundle of raw nerves, but as a centered, capable leader, ready to engage in a difficult conversation with clarity and composure. The meeting hasn't changed, but their capacity to navigate it has been transformed by a few intentional breaths. This power is available to you not just in high-stakes moments, but in the daily irritations and frustrations that generate so much background noise. The next time you feel that first flash of anger in a traffic jam, or the creeping anxiety from an overflowing inbox, or the impatience while waiting in a long line, I want you to try a 1-minute breathing exercise. Don't wait for a crisis. Practice in the calm moments so the tool is familiar when you need it most. Simply stop what you're doing, close your eyes if you can, and place your focus entirely on the sensation of the air moving in and out of your body. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6. If your mind wanders, gently guide it back to the physical feeling of the breath. That's it. You don't need a special app or a quiet room. You just need to remember that the most ancient technology for calm is built right into you. A direct line from the chaos of emotion to the clarity of reason, waiting only for your conscious attention to bring it to life. What blocks you can build you if you see it as an oracle would. This is the core of the Stoic art of reframing, a mental alchemy that transforms leaden setbacks into golden opportunities for growth. The ancient oracles were masters of this perspective shift. When a leader received a prophecy of hardship, a coming famine, a difficult battle, a betrayal, it was never presented as a simple sentence of doom. It was framed as a test of character, a divine challenge designed to forge a stronger, wiser ruler. The obstacle itself was the training ground. The Stoics took this ancient wisdom and made it a central pillar of their philosophy, arguing that the impediment is not merely something to be endured, but the very substance and fuel for progress itself. They believed that within every barrier lies a hidden curriculum, a set of lessons in resilience, creativity, and virtue that cannot be learned in times of ease and comfort. Marcus Aurelius, who faced more than his share of imperial challenges, embedded this principle deep within his personal meditations. He offered a perspective that is both jarring and empowering, writing, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Sit with that for a moment. The thing blocking your path isn't just a detour, it is the path." This isn't naive optimism or positive thinking. It's a profound recognition that our goals are not separate from the obstacles we meet in pursuing them. The goal is to build a strong character, and the obstacle provides the necessary resistance to make that happen, just as a blade is sharpened by friction against a whetstone. The difficulty is not an interruption of the plan. It is an essential part of the plan's fulfillment, revealing our resourcefulness and testing our commitment. Without the resistance, there is no strength gained. History is filled with spectacular examples of individuals who embodied this oracle like reframing, turning profound limitations into legendary strengths. Consider the story of Demosthenes, the greatest orator of ancient Athens. As a young man, he dreamt of becoming a public speaker, but was plagued by a debilitating speech impediment and a weak, ineffective voice. In the eyes of his contemporaries, these were insurmountable obstacles to his ambition. He could have easily accepted this verdict and chosen another path. But Demosthenes saw the obstacle as the way. He reframed his weakness not as a fate to be accepted, but as a challenge to be met with immense creativity and discipline. He filled his mouth with pebbles and practiced speaking clearly over the roar of the ocean waves to strengthen his voice and enunciation. He built an underground study to practice without distraction and shaved one side of his head to force himself to stay indoors and train. His physical limitations became the brutal, demanding coach that forged his legendary eloquence. The very thing that blocked him became the instrument of his unparalleled success, because he chose to see it not as a barrier, but as the curriculum. This practice is just as powerful, and perhaps even more necessary, in the complexities of modern life. Imagine a software development team whose key project is abruptly cancelled after months of work due to a sudden shift in company strategy. The initial reaction is one of collective frustration and demoralization, a classic obstacle. the emotional noise is loud, shouting about wasted effort and lost time. A team stuck in this frame will become stagnant and disengaged, but a team lead trained in Stoic reframing will guide them to see the oracle's truth in the situation. They might gather everyone and say, "Okay, this is our obstacle. How does it advance our action? What did we build in these last 6 months that we still have?" Together, they realize that while the specific product is dead, they have created a powerful new code library, honed their collaborative skills, and identified a more efficient workflow. The cancelled project was not a waste. It was a 6-month research and development sprint that has now equipped them with unique assets no other team possesses. The obstacle becomes the way forward, providing them with the tools and experience to pivot faster and more effectively than anyone else onto the company's new strategic path. Their setback becomes their advantage. This transformative power begins with a simple but profound shift in the question you ask. When you encounter an obstacle, the default question is, "Why is this happening to me? How do I get rid of it?" The Stoic, channeling the oracle, asks a different question entirely. "How can I use this? What is this here to teach me? How does this help me advance?" This isn't about denying the difficulty or the frustration. It's about redirecting your energy from passive complaint to active engagement with the problem itself. So I want to bring this directly into your world right now. Bring to mind one current obstacle. It might be a professional rejection, a health concern, a financial pinch, or a difficult relationship dynamic. Now, instead of focusing on how to make it disappear, try the Stoic reframe. Ask yourself, if this obstacle were a deliberate test designed to make me stronger, wiser, or more creative, what would it be teaching me? Is it teaching me patience, resilience, how to ask for help, how to communicate more clearly, how to simplify my life? Brainstorm 3 ways this apparent block could actually be building you. You might find that the very thing you've been resisting holds the key to your next breakthrough, waiting only for you to shift your perspective and see the challenge as the oracle would, not as a curse, but as a carefully disguised invitation to grow. Rituals quiet the mind, something oracles and Stoics understood well. Before a seeker could receive a prophecy at Delphi, they had to undergo a specific series of steps: purification in the sacred waters, the offering of a gift, and a period of waiting in the quiet anticipation of the temple. This structured process wasn't mere superstition. It was a psychological technology designed to transition the mind from the chaotic, emotional state of everyday concerns into a receptive, focused state capable of hearing a deeper truth. The Stoics recognized this same profound value in the architecture of our daily lives. They saw that without intentional structure, our minds are at the mercy of whatever stimulus or emotion happens to strike first each day, blown about by the winds of external events. A consistent routine acts as an anchor, grounding us in our own values and priorities before the world has a chance to impose its own. It creates a predictable island of calm in the turbulent sea of daily life, significantly reducing the emotional volatility that comes from feeling perpetually reactive and unprepared. Seneca, a man deeply immersed in the frantic political world of ancient Rome, was a staunch advocate for the protective power of daily habits. He saw them not as a boring restriction of freedom, but as the very foundation of it. In his moral letters to Lucilius, he wrote, "You must know yourself and your resources, so that you may neither hope for more than is permitted nor despair of what you can accomplish. You must keep to a fixed routine. You must find for yourself a standard that you never violate." This fixed routine he speaks of is the Stoics' personal oracle ritual. It's a non-negotiable appointment with oneself to practice the principles of clarity, virtue, and intention, ensuring that these ideals are not just abstract thoughts, but are woven into the fabric of our daily existence. By deciding in advance how we will begin and end our days, we preempt the chaos. We take the steering wheel of our consciousness out of the hands of chance and place it firmly back in our own grip, setting a deliberate tone of calm that can weather the inevitable storms to come. Consider the morning routine of a modern executive whose day is a relentless barrage of decisions, meetings, and potential crises. Without a grounding ritual, they might wake up and immediately reach for their phone, instantly injecting their fresh consciousness with a jolt of urgent emails, alarming news headlines, and social media pressure. They begin their day in a state of reactive anxiety, their emotional state already hijacked by external demands before they've even had a chance to choose their own mindset. Now imagine that same leader has committed to a steadfast Stoic-inspired ritual. They wake 30 minutes earlier not to do more work but to do the inner work. They might spend 5 minutes in silent meditation, focusing only on the breath to center the mind. They might then read a page from Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, not as academic study, but as a direct conversation with a wise mentor, seeking one idea to guide their actions that day. Finally, they might journal for 10 minutes, not just logging events, but actively preparing for the day ahead using a Stoic exercise like premeditatio malorum, mentally rehearsing potential challenges and visualizing themselves responding with patience and wisdom. This entire ritual takes less than half an hour, but its effect is transformative. When they finally check their phone or step into their first meeting, they do so from a place of centered calm. The unexpected problems and difficult conversations are no longer perceived as existential threats, but as the specific challenges they have already mentally prepared for. Their routine has become their daily consultation with the oracle within, providing a clarity and stability that ripples out into every interaction and decision. This power isn't reserved for the mornings. An evening ritual can be just as potent for processing the day's events and releasing its accumulated emotional noise. A simple practice of reviewing the day, asking what went well, what could have been handled better, and what lessons were learned acts as a circuit breaker for rumination. It allows you to extract the wisdom from the events and then consciously let them go, preventing the worries of today from spilling over into the tranquility of the night and the potential of tomorrow. The key is not the complexity of the ritual, but its consistency and its intentionality. It is a dedicated space you carve out to honor your commitment to your own mental clarity. I encourage you to start not with a grand overhaul, but with one small, sustainable anchor. Perhaps it's committing to 60 seconds of mindful breathing before you check your phone in the morning. Maybe it's writing down one thing you're intentionally letting go of before you go to sleep. Choose one tiny ritual, practice it with unwavering consistency for 1 week, and observe the subtle but powerful shift as you begin to build your own sanctuary of calm amidst the noise, one grounded day at a time. Rushing often leads to error. Patience reveals truth. This simple, timeless observation cuts to the heart of a profound challenge we all face: the intense discomfort of not knowing, the gnawing anxiety that arises when the path ahead is shrouded in fog. In our modern world, we treat uncertainty like a system error to be fixed, a problem to be solved with immediate, frantic action. We refresh our inboxes obsessively for news. We demand instant answers from colleagues. We make hasty decisions just to feel like we're moving, mistaking motion for progress. The ancient oracles understood this human impulse towards haste, and they actively worked against it. A leader would arrive at the temple with a burning question, desperate for an immediate answer, only to be subjected to a lengthy, deliberate process of purification, sacrifice, and waiting. This enforced pause was not a bureaucratic delay. It was the first part of the prophecy itself. It was a training in patience, a lesson that the deepest truths are not found in the frantic first impulse, but in the quiet clarity that emerges when we allow time and reflection to do their work. The Stoics elevated this understanding into a core virtue, seeing patience not as passive waiting, but as an active, powerful state of mind. It is the disciplined choice to withhold judgment and action until the situation reveals itself more fully, trusting that clarity often comes to those who are willing to hold their ground amidst ambiguity. Epictetus, who focused intensely on the alignment between our actions and what is within our control, offered a beautifully simple metaphor for this. He said, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen." This is the essence of Stoic patience. You cannot command a fig to appear. You can only tend to the tree, protect it from harm, and wait for the natural process of growth to unfold. Forcing the fruit prematurely only results in something bitter and inedible. In the same way, forcing a decision or an outcome in a complex situation before the necessary elements have had time to align almost guarantees a flawed and bitter result. Patience is the wisdom to distinguish between the work of preparation, which is ours to do, and the mystery of timing, which is not. Consider the high-pressure environment of an emergency room. A patient arrives with confusing, contradictory symptoms. The emotional noise is intense, family members are anxious, the patient is in distress, and the urge to do something, anything immediately, is overwhelming. An impatient doctor, rushing to provide an answer, might latch onto the first plausible diagnosis and begin treatment, potentially missing a rarer but more critical underlying condition. A doctor trained in the Stoic virtue of patience, however, understands that in the face of uncertainty, the most powerful action can sometimes be a deliberate and focused inaction. They will methodically rule out possibilities, order the necessary tests, and consult with colleagues, all while managing the anxiety in the room. They tolerate the discomfort of not having the answer right now because they know that a misdiagnosis born of haste could be catastrophic. Their patience is not indecision. It is a highly disciplined form of respect for the truth. By waiting for the test results to clarify the picture, they ultimately arrive at the correct treatment faster and more effectively than if they had rushed. Their patience reveals the truth that was hidden in the noise. This principle applies with equal force to the boardroom, the living room, and anywhere we face complex decisions without perfect information. Think about a time you felt pressured to accept a job offer because you were afraid no other would come, only to later discover a far better opportunity was just around the corner had you only waited. Or a moment in a disagreement where you rushed to get your point across, talking over the other person to end the tension, only to escalate the conflict and prevent any real understanding. In both cases, the rush to resolve the uncertainty actively created the very error we were trying to avoid. Now, bring this into your present moment. I want you to recall a specific instance in your own life where patience truly paid off. Perhaps you waited to make a large purchase until you had thoroughly researched it, saving yourself from buyer's remorse. Maybe you stayed quiet in a heated discussion and listened, and in that space of patience, you heard the real concern behind the other person's anger, completely changing the dynamic. Sit with that memory for a moment and feel the quality of that outcome. It likely carries a sense of rightness, of integrity, because it was earned through respect for the process rather than seized through force. That is the fruit of patience Epictetus described. Now look at your current landscape. Where are you feeling that familiar, anxious pressure to rush, to force a solution, to make the fig appear today? See if you can apply the lesson from your own past. Can you identify one situation where choosing to actively wait, to watch, to listen, to gather more information without forcing a conclusion might allow a clearer, truer path to reveal itself? Pride deafens, humility listens as oracles required. When a powerful ruler journeyed to Delphi or Dodona, they weren't arriving to issue commands or assert their authority. They were approaching as a supplicant, consciously setting aside their ego and status to kneel before a higher wisdom. This act of deliberate humbling was the necessary precondition for receiving a clear message, as it created a mental and emotional space empty enough to accept a truth that might contradict their personal desires or flatter their self-image. The Stoics recognized this same dynamic in the everyday act of receiving feedback, elevating humility from a passive virtue into an active skill, a form of emotional discipline that allows us to lower our defensive walls so that criticism, rather than bouncing off our armor, can land and be examined for its hidden value. It's the conscious decision to prioritize the potential for growth over the immediate comfort of being right. This Stoic humility is not about self-abasement or thinking less of oneself. It is about thinking of oneself less. It's a shift in focus from protecting a fragile ego to pursuing objective improvement. The defensive reactions we all know so well, the justification, the counter-accusation, the dismissive wave of the hand, are all manifestations of pride trying to shield itself from a perceived attack. Stoicism asks us to see feedback not as an attack on our character, but as valuable data about the impact of our actions. Seneca, who served as an advisor to the notoriously prideful Emperor Nero, understood the immense courage required to remain open to correction. He wrote, "The best ideas are common property. If you see any good advice, take it from whoever gave it." This is a radical statement. It completely divorces the value of the message from the status of the messenger. The truth of a criticism doesn't diminish if it comes from a junior employee, a rival, or even someone you dislike. Stoic humility is the practiced ability to silence the internal voice that shouts, "How dare they?" and instead ask the quieter, more productive question, "What can I learn?" Imagine a seasoned department head, a leader with 2 decades of experience who has always received glowing annual reviews. A new, much younger member of their team schedules a one-on-one and nervously offers some constructive feedback. They suggest that the leader's habit of interrupting people in meetings, perhaps intended as a way to drive efficiency, is actually making junior staff feel unheard and reluctant to share ideas. The leader's pride, the accumulation of 20 years of being in charge, rears up immediately. The internal monologue is loud and defensive. Who is this inexperienced newcomer to critique my leadership style? My methods have delivered results for years. They just can't handle a fast-paced discussion. This is pride deafening. It will likely lead to a dismissive response that shuts down the conversation and ensures the young employee never offers another honest thought. But if this leader has cultivated Stoic humility, they will pause. They will consciously humble themselves, just as the ancient ruler did before the oracle. They will take a breath and choose to listen. They might say, "Thank you for having the courage to tell me that. Can you help me understand a specific instance so I can see it more clearly?" This shift transforms the interaction from a threat to a partnership. By accepting the feedback without ego, the leader gains access to a crucial blind spot. They learn something about their own behavior that was inhibiting their team's performance, a truth they were shielded from by their own position and pride. That single piece of humble acceptance does more for their leadership than a dozen glowing reviews ever could. This practice requires us to actively reframe how we see criticism. It is not a verdict on our worth, but a map. It shows us where we have an opportunity to become stronger, more effective, and more aligned with our virtues. The sting we feel is often not the pain of being wrong, but the friction of growth. It's the sound of an old, limiting belief being sanded away to make room for a better version of ourselves. The most successful people in any field are not those who are immune to criticism, but those who have developed a system for processing it, who have built a personal oracle that values truth over comfort. I want to invite you to make this incredibly practical right now. This week, proactively seek out one piece of honest feedback from someone you trust. It could be a colleague, a partner, or a friend. Ask a simple, open-ended question like, "What's one thing you see me doing that might be holding me back?" Or, "How could I be a better listener?" Then, and this is the crucial Stoic part, your only job is to receive it. Your task is not to agree, disagree, explain, or justify. Your task is to listen attentively, thank them sincerely for their honesty, and then sit with the information privately. Let your first reaction pass, and then, in the quiet after the initial sting, ask yourself the only question that matters. If there is even a fraction of truth in this, how could acknowledging it help me grow? This single act of sought-out humility can open a channel to truths you've been missing, cutting through the noise of your own pride to hear the clear, guiding voice of someone who sees you from the outside. Nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished, a lesson for restless minds. We live in a world that prizes speed, urgency, and constant doing, creating a frantic internal rhythm that is completely out of sync with the natural world around us. This dissonance is a primary source of our emotional noise. The ancient oracles understood this. They didn't operate from bustling city centers, but from serene, natural settings, grottos, forests, and mountain springs, because they knew that the clarity needed to interpret divine signs could only be found in an environment that reflected a deeper, more patient order. The Stoics, in their pursuit of a rational life, lived in accordance with nature, made this same connection. They saw the natural world not just as a resource to be used, but as the ultimate mentor, a living textbook on resilience, impermanence, and serene purpose. By consciously observing its rhythms, we can calibrate our own internal state, slowing our frantic thoughts to match the patient, unhurried tempo of the earth itself, and in that quietude, find the perspective we so desperately seek. Marcus Aurelius, even amidst the immense pressures of ruling an empire, constantly turned his gaze to nature to find solace and realignment. In his meditations, he doesn't just see a tree or a river, he sees a masterclass in virtue and acceptance. He writes, "Look at the stars and see yourself running with them. Think constantly on the changes of the elements into one another, for such thoughts wash away the dust of earthly life." This is the core of the practice. He isn't suggesting a mere escape into daydreaming. He is engaging in a profound cognitive exercise. By contemplating the vast, orderly cycles of the cosmos, the predictable rising and setting of the sun, the changing seasons, the endless flow of a river into the sea, he is reminding himself of his own small but purposeful place within a magnificent, interconnected whole. His personal anxieties and irritations, when held up against this cosmic backdrop, are revealed for what they are: a fleeting, insignificant dust. The harmony of nature becomes a mirror, reflecting back a model of how to live, accepting what cannot be changed, contributing to the whole, and performing our unique function with grace, just as a rose blooms without striving to be a waterfall. This isn't an abstract philosophical idea. It's a tool you can use in your daily life with immediate, tangible effects. Imagine a professional, let's call him David, who has just endured a brutally stressful week. A major project he was leading fell apart at the last minute due to circumstances beyond his control. He's been cycling through feelings of anger, frustration, and professional shame for days, his mind a tangled knot of recrimination and anxious what-ifs. The emotional noise is deafening. On Saturday morning, feeling utterly drained, he forces himself to leave his laptop and take a walk in a nearby forest preserve. For the first 20 minutes, his mind is still back in the office, replaying the failure. But gradually, the natural world begins to intrude upon his internal drama. He notices the sheer, uncomplicated patience of the trees, standing tall through countless storms. He watches a stream cascade over rocks, not fighting the obstacles but flowing around and over them, its power undiminished by the resistance. He sees the evidence of endless cycles of decay and new growth on the forest floor. In that setting, his project's failure begins to feel less like a permanent catastrophe and more like a single event in a much longer cycle. The quiet persistence of nature mirrors a potential for resilience within himself that his panic had obscured. He doesn't magically solve his work problem on that walk, but he returns home with a quieted mind. The emotional static has been dialed down, replaced by a calmer, more accepting perspective. He's able to see the setback not as a verdict on his ability, but as a natural part of the creative and professional process, a winter season that will inevitably be followed by a spring if he continues to plant seeds. This week, I want to extend a simple but powerful invitation to you. Carve out just 30 minutes to immerse yourself in a natural setting, whether it's a local park, a beach, a hiking trail, or even your own backyard garden. But this isn't just about getting some fresh air. Go with the specific intention of using nature as a mirror. Leave your headphones behind and allow yourself to be fully present. Observe the effortless way a bird builds its nest, focused only on the task at hand without anxiety about tomorrow. Watch the clouds drift and change form, a constant reminder of impermanence. Feel the solid, unchanging presence of a large rock or an old tree. As you observe these things, pay close attention to the subtle shifts in your own inner state. Does the frantic pace of your thoughts begin to slow down to match the rhythm of your surroundings? Do the problems that felt monolithic an hour ago start to seem more manageable, just another part of a larger, ever-changing landscape? This practice is your chance to consult with the oldest oracle of all, to learn the lessons of patience, resilience, and perspective that are written in every leaf and stone, waiting only for us to become quiet enough to read them. Each night, ask, what did the day teach me beneath the noise? This simple question is the gateway to one of the most transformative Stoic practices, the evening reflection, a personal ritual that allows you to sift through the emotional debris of the day to uncover the golden nuggets of truth hidden within. Just as the ancient oracles didn't merely deliver a message but spent time deciphering the signs and symbols to extract its deepest meaning, we too must become interpreters of our own daily experiences. The events of our lives are the raw data, the cryptic signs. Our evening review is the sacred space where we sit as our own oracle, separating the fleeting emotional reactions from the enduring lessons that can guide our future actions. This isn't about replaying the day's drama or indulging in self-criticism. It's a disciplined exercise in philosophical archaeology, carefully brushing away the dust of distraction to reveal the structural patterns of our behavior and the core truths about our character. Epictetus, who placed immense value on self-examination, explicitly instructed his students to make this a non-negotiable part of their day. He advised, "Let sleep not come upon your weary eyes until you have reckoned up each deed of the day." Where did I go wrong? What did I do? What duty is left undone? Start there. Then review your acts, and for the misdeeds be chastened, for the good be glad. Notice the order of his questions. He doesn't start with "What did I achieve?" but with "Where did I go wrong?" This isn't promoting negativity. It's a profound recognition that our greatest growth comes from honestly confronting our missteps and understanding the judgments that led to them. The goal is to catch the small errors in thinking before they harden into major flaws in character. By examining where we assented to an irrational impression or acted out of pride or fear, we gradually rewire our automatic responses, training ourselves to pause and choose more wisely the next time a similar situation arises. This nightly audit is how we become active participants in our own moral and intellectual development, rather than passive victims of our unexamined impulses. Consider the example of a project manager named Lena. For weeks, she noticed a pattern of feeling drained and irritable after her team's weekly sync-up meetings. During her evening reflections, she would simply dismiss it as the stress of her job, but one night she decided to go deeper. Instead of just noting the feeling, she applied the Stoic practice of objective description. She replayed the last meeting in her mind, not as a participant lost in the emotion, but as a neutral observer. She noticed a specific moment. A junior team member had suggested a different technical approach, and Lena had quickly, almost abruptly, dismissed it, citing time constraints. As she sat with this memory, she connected it to other similar moments. The truth that emerged from beneath the noise of her irritation wasn't about the team member's idea, it was a truth about herself. She uncovered a recurring emotional trigger, a deep-seated anxiety about appearing indecisive or lacking authority in front of her team. Her quick dismissals were a defensive mechanism, a way to project a confidence she didn't always feel. This realization, born from dedicated evening reflection, was a monumental insight. It had nothing to do with the technical merits of any idea, and everything to do with her own internal narrative. Armed with this clarity, she could now work on the real issue, her relationship with her own authority, rather than continuing to blame external circumstances for her frustration. To make this practice your own, you don't need a lengthy journaling session. You can begin with a simple, powerful 3-question framework designed to cut straight to the heart of the matter without getting lost in the story. First, ask yourself, what went well? This isn't about arrogant celebration, but about identifying moments where you acted in alignment with your virtues. Did you show patience in a long line? Did you offer help to a colleague without being asked? Acknowledging these acts reinforces positive patterns and reminds you that progress is possible. The second question is, what could improve? Frame this not as what did I do wrong, but as where is there an opportunity for growth? This is where you apply Epictetus's counsel. Be specific and kind. Instead of, I was a bad listener, try, during my conversation with David, I noticed I was formulating my response instead of fully listening when he started talking about his challenges. This identifies the exact point of departure from your values. Finally, and most importantly, ask what truth emerged. This is the oracle's question. This is where you look for the deeper lesson, the pattern, the core belief that was driving your behavior. In Lena's case, the truth was about her trigger around authority. For you, it might be realizing that your anxiety about a presentation was rooted in a desire for perfectionism, not preparation, or that your frustration with a family member stems from an unmet need for appreciation rather than their actual actions. This third question transforms the review from a simple log of events into a genuine dialogue with your deepest self, ensuring that each day, no matter how chaotic, contributes a piece of wisdom to the person you are becoming. Knowing life is short sharpens hearing for truth, not noise. This is the stark, clarifying power behind the ancient Stoic practice of memento mori, the deliberate remembrance of our own mortality. For the leaders who journeyed to consult the oracles, the specter of death was never far from the prophecy. The seers often framed their guidance within the finite span of a human life, using the urgency of mortality to cut through a ruler's vanity, ambition, or fear, directing their attention to the legacy they would leave rather than the temporary comforts they could enjoy. The Stoics adopted this same unflinching gaze into the abyss, not to cultivate morbidity or despair, but to achieve the exact opposite: a vibrant, focused, and intensely meaningful way of living. By keeping the reality of our inevitable end firmly in view, we are granted a powerful lens through which to evaluate our choices, our worries, and our attachments. The trivial concerns that normally consume so much of our mental energy, the minor slights, the desire for approval, the anxiety over inconsequential outcomes, are suddenly revealed for what they are: distracting noise that obscures the essential signal of what truly matters. Seneca, in his moral letters to Lucilius, drives this point home with his characteristically piercing clarity. He writes, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." This single sentence captures the core of our self-deception. We fritter away our days as if we have an endless supply of them, postponing our virtues, our passions, and our difficult conversations for a future that is never guaranteed. We fear temporary embarrassments and cling to fleeting pleasures, living in a state of perpetual distraction from the one certainty we all face. Seneca's remedy is to shatter this illusion. He advises us to live each day as if it were the last, not in a frenzy of bucket list checking, but with the profound seriousness and clarity that such a perspective brings. He urges, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. This is the ultimate tool for prioritization. When you genuinely internalize that your time is strictly limited, the question of how you spend it becomes the most important question you can ask. The emotional noise of societal expectations, frivolous desires, and petty grievances simply cannot compete with the quiet, sobering voice that asks, "Is this how you want to spend your one precious, finite life?" Consider a seasoned executive who has built a successful career through cautious, consensus-driven decisions. They are respected, comfortable, and on a predictable path to a secure retirement. Then they receive a sudden health scare, a cancer diagnosis that, while treatable, serves as a brutal and undeniable memento mori. The event acts like a thunderclap that silences all the background noise of their professional life. The worry about the next quarterly report, the political maneuvering for a promotion, the fear of rocking the boat, it all evaporates. In the stark light of their own mortality, a deeper truth emerges. They have been living a life designed to minimize risk, not to maximize purpose. With this new clarity, they return to their role transformed. They begin championing a long-dormant, values-driven project that they had previously considered too controversial or risky, perhaps a bold sustainability initiative or a significant investment in employee well-being that would dent short-term profits. Their colleagues might see it as a sudden change in character, but the executive understands it as a return to their core self, a self that had been silenced by decades of noise. They are no longer making decisions for a future that may not exist. They are making decisions that make the present meaningful. The awareness of death hasn't made them reckless. It has made them radically honest, allowing them to lead with a courage that is free from the fear of external judgment. This practice is not about waiting for a life-altering crisis to force this perspective upon us. We can choose to incorporate this clarifying lens into our daily routine. I want you to take a moment right now to engage in a brief mental exercise. Close your eyes and imagine, with as much vivid detail as you can muster, that this day is in fact your last. Not in a dramatic, cinematic sense, but in an ordinary, real way. What shifts, what conversations suddenly seem essential, and which ones feel like a complete waste of your final hours? What work feels deeply meaningful, and what tasks are exposed as mere busy work? Does the criticism you received yesterday still sting, or does it seem laughably insignificant? This isn't an exercise in fear, it's an exercise in focus. It's the practice of using the ultimate deadline to instantly sort the essential from the trivial. By making this a regular, perhaps even daily, moment of reflection, we can continually refine our priorities, ensuring that we are not just adding days to our life, but life to our days, and in doing so, hearing the truths we were always meant to hear. True leadership isn't about loud commands, it's about quiet discernment. It's the ability to hear the signal of what truly matters through the deafening static of crisis, opinion, and emotion, much like an ancient ruler seeking the clear, unattached truth from an oracle's prophecy. This isn't a passive quality, it's the active cultivation of an inner sanctuary, built brick by brick with the Stoic practices we've explored. When integrated, these principles don't just make you a slightly better manager, they transform your entire approach to influence, decision-making, and resilience, forging a leader who can navigate chaos not by shouting over it, but by understanding its very nature. It's the difference between being a weather vane spun in every direction by the latest storm and being a compass consistently pointing toward true north no matter how fierce the winds may blow. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps history's most documented leader-philosopher, perfectly captured this ideal when he wrote, "A man must stand erect, not be kept erect by others." This is the ultimate summary of Stoic leadership. It's an internal foundation of virtue and reason that allows you to lead from a place of unshakable integrity, rather than from a desperate need for external validation or a fearful reaction to external events. Your authority doesn't come from your title, but from your character. Your decisions aren't driven by the mood of the crowd, but by a deep commitment to what is right. This is how you move from managing outcomes to stewarding purpose, creating a ripple effect of calm and focus that can steady an entire organization amidst uncertainty. You become the oracle for your own team, not by having all the answers, but by embodying the clarity from which good answers can emerge. Consider a modern CEO navigating their company through a severe, unexpected market downturn. The pressure is immense, shareholders are panicking, competitors are faltering, and headlines are predicting doom. A reactive leader, untrained in these principles, might be gripped by fear, ordering sweeping, frantic layoffs, slashing important long-term projects to appease short-term anxieties, and communicating from a place of desperation that only amplifies the fear throughout the company culture. Now envision a leader who has integrated these Stoic tools. They begin with a pause, creating space between the alarming news and their response. They practice objective description, stripping away the catastrophic language to see the bare facts. Revenues have dropped by a specific percentage, certain market segments have softened, but the company's core products and talented team remain intact. They apply the dichotomy of control, focusing their energy not on fretting over the uncontrollable market, but on the controllable actions, transparent communication, strategic cost saving that protects core capabilities, and empowering their team to innovate more efficiently. They use the view from above to see this downturn in the context of the company's decade-long story, recognizing it as a difficult chapter, not the ending. They might even practice premeditatio malorum, having mentally rehearsed such a scenario, which allows them to respond with calm preparedness rather than shock. This leader's actions, grounded in Stoic clarity, would be decisive yet measured, honest yet hopeful. They would acknowledge the hardship while confidently outlining the rational path forward, becoming a stabilizing force that inspires confidence and loyalty rather than panic and exodus. This transformation is within reach for anyone who leads, whether you're at the helm of a Fortune 500 company, a small team, a classroom, or a family. The journey doesn't require mastering everything at once. It begins with a single, focused commitment. So as we bring this exploration to a close, I want to leave you with a direct and personal challenge. Look back over these principles: the pause, the dichotomy of control, the view from above, amor fati, objective description, the evening review. Which one resonates most deeply with the leadership challenge you are facing right now? Is it the need to listen more and react less? Is it the struggle to let go of others' opinions? Is it the anxiety over an uncertain future? Choose one. Just one, and for the next week, make a conscious, non-negotiable effort to apply that single principle in your daily interactions and decisions. Observe what happens. Does that moment of pause before a meeting change its tone? Does writing down your impressions each evening reveal a pattern you were missing? This is how you build your inner citadel, one disciplined stone at a time, until you too can lead with the quiet discernment that has guided wise leaders for millennia. So we've traveled a long path together, from the hushed temples of ancient Greece to the noisy, demanding reality of our own lives. We've explored how the stillness of the oracle and the pause of the Stoic create the first essential moment of clarity. We've seen the power of discernment, of separating the bare facts from the dramatic stories we tell about them, and of focusing our energy only on what is within our control. We've built resilience by embracing our fate, by reframing obstacles, and by voluntarily stepping into discomfort to prove our own strength to ourselves. And we've practiced presence, learning to pull our attention back from the ghosts of the past and the anxieties of the future to fully inhabit the only moment where we can ever truly act, the present. These aren't just abstract philosophical ideas. They are a toolkit, a practical and profoundly effective set of methods for turning down the volume on the world's chaos so you can hear your own inner truth with perfect clarity. This is the timeless gift of Stoicism. It doesn't ask the noise to stop. It knows the world will always be loud, unpredictable, and often unfair. Instead, it gives you the earplugs of reason and the amplifier of virtue. It trains you to become the calm, clear-eyed interpreter of your own life, just as the oracles were for the leaders who sought their guidance. The goal was never to become emotionless, but to ensure that your emotions inform you without controlling you, that they become data to be considered, not commands to be blindly obeyed. Epictetus, who knew more than most about facing a world he could not control, left us with a closing thought that cuts right to the heart of this entire practice. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Your impressions, your judgments, your assents, this is the raw material of your life. Master that, and you master everything." And so the final, most important question moves from the theoretical to the deeply personal. It's a question only you can answer. With all of this in mind, the pauses, the reflections, the disciplines, what is the one area of your life where the emotional noise is currently the loudest? Where is the static of anxiety or pride or fear or desire drowning out the signal of what you know to be true and right? Is it in a specific relationship that feels fraught with misunderstanding? Is it in your career where the pressure to perform is clouding your sense of purpose? Or is it a quieter, more internal struggle, a persistent worry about the future or a regret about the past that plays on a loop in your mind? Identify that one area. And then make a quiet promise to yourself to apply just one of the tools from this vast Stoic toolkit. Perhaps this week, you will practice the evening review to unpack that tension. Maybe you will use the view from above the next time that specific anxiety arises. Or maybe your practice will be as simple as taking 3 conscious breaths before you respond in a heated moment. This is how it begins, not with a grand, sweeping overhaul of your entire life, but with a single, deliberate choice to listen more closely to the truth beneath the noise. If this journey into ancient wisdom has resonated with you, if you found even one idea that you want to bring into your own life, I invite you to join this conversation. Share your one area for practice in the comments below. Let's learn from each other and build a community focused on clarity and purpose. And if you want to continue this exploration, consider subscribing to the channel for more content that helps you live with more intention and less reactivity. Thank you for your time and your attention. This hasn't been about giving you answers, but about reminding you that the deepest answers you seek are already within you, waiting patiently for the noise to settle so they can finally be heard.